Okay, so I'm gonna call us to order at 6:33. I would like to talk about the consent agenda. Does anyone want to make a motion regarding the consent agenda? Has everyone had a chance to read the previous minutes?
Yes.
There's a bunch of policies in there. And the reports.
Since I'm intimately familiar with the policies, I make a motion to accept the consent agenda as written.
Can I ask a question about a policy?
You may.
My question
Hopefully I have
is-
the answer.
Yes. My question is about the tobacco policy, the tobacco prohibition policy. And really my question is, if I am a new employee or an employee of one of these fine institutions and I was a smoker before I started, like, can I bring my tobacco gum with me?
Oh, that's weird that you're asking.
Tobacco gum or tobacco?
No, like my,
Just
well,
your
I've
cessation-
not
your
ever been a
cessation
smoker,
product?
so,
There we go.
yeah,
Yes.
my cessation
I
product.
believe that is okay. We just had a little discussion around this today, but it didn't involve the cessation product. It actually involved the actual
The only reason
tobacco.
why I asked was because there was a line about tobacco gum.
Can you refer us to that, because
What page are you on?
students,
Yeah, hold on, let me try to find it.
underage individuals have to have a nurse or other designated party hold it for them, I believe. So
Gotcha.
they can access it when they need it. And Lynn, correct me if I'm going down the wrong road, please.
Frankly, I'm not remembering that specific language. I'm gonna find it.
Yeah, sorry. I thought
Can you
this
tell
would be
me what
easy.
part of it, Jean Marie, you're pointing to?
Hold on, let me find it. Well, I was reading sorry, I'm going from back to front. It would be E5 section definitions.
Do you have a page?
Page E5 2 of 4, page 2 of 4. It says, it lists off the, is not limited to cigarettes, cigars, all these things I don't even understand. E-cigarettes, vapes, non-tobacco, nicotine products, tobacco and nicotine substitutes and other forms of tobacco. I guess, maybe it doesn't say gum. I think
I
I
don't
was.
think that's cessation stuff, though.
That's really was my question. Like, if I took a job here and I was a smoker and I realized there's a no smoking policy here, can I now like wear my patch or chew my gum? I would
Yes.
think the answer to that is yes, but I just wanted to make sure we weren't eliminating that choice for folks as like a new employee.
Right, can you just point me to the page? I'm sorry.
E5, page 2 of 4, under definition that is tobacco/nicotine product.
So honestly, Jean Marie, that never came up in a conversation at any
Okay.
time that we reviewed tobacco, is the actual cessation product
Yeah.
themselves. So it's not covered in this policy, but it's not, if somebody was wearing a badge, I certainly would not think that that was something that would
was against
warrant
the policy,
us going
yeah.
to a policy violation.
And I think, in terms of our wellness policies, we want to encourage employees to pursue whatever wellness opportunities
Right.
they need to. And I think it's a little bit different when it's a minor child
Right.
using any cessation product, because then I think the school nurse or designee has to oversee that in some way, shape, or form,
Gotcha.
just like Tylenol.
Okay, that's all. And we'll see that one again, because isn't that a first reading on the tobacco? I think so.
Yes.
Yeah, that was my only concern. I just want to make sure we weren't inadvertently preventing people from bringing their cessation products.
Thanks for bringing that up, though. All of these points are really important.
Okay, that is my only question. Any other comments? we are about to approve the consent agenda. I know, I got you.
You do?
Yeah.
I was gonna ask if we could move.
I'll make that.
Oh, cool,
got
thanks,
you.
you do,
I
you
got
got
you.
me, you got me.
I'll
Okay.
make the motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mary. All in favor? Oh,
I already
sorry.
made that motion.
Yes, that's correct. Lisa
Oh.
made the motion.
Oh, I'm gonna second it, even though we're not doing seconds.
Any
We like
other questions or concerns? Okay, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, now, in agenda preview and prioritization, I would like to suggest that we reorganize, or I want to make sure that we allow a few moments to have one of our visitors offer us a presentation regarding a fundraiser for the Berkshire Playground. Anybody have an issue with that? Okay. Yes, please.
It's very
The
brief,
floor is
thank
yours.
you.
See?
Hi there, so I'm Emily Grims and I'm a parent from Berkshire. I have 2 students there, a kindergartner and a 3rd grader. And I'm a member of the PTO. And we took on a project this year to build a dedicated preschool playground for our play school and preschool kids. My lovely assistant Caroline, working on the picture. But the reason that we're doing this is because right now we have a wonderful playground, but it's designed for kids 5 to above 12. And there's no fenced area, so the poor teachers are constantly trying to keep the kids from going and playing on this really wonderful, big, fun, dangerous structure for them. So what we'd like to do is to build a specific playground for them that's designed for children ages 2 to 5. If you know the Berkshire setup, it's going to be right outside the cafeteria doors, in between the dome that's going to be coming down, just right in that spot there. There's no groundwork that needs to be done according to the installer. It's actually the same person who installed our big playground 15 or 20 years ago. So it's the Pettinelli group is the one that's doing it, if that means anything to you. So it'll be out there, quick and easy access. It's going to be fenced in with 2 gates. It's going to meet all of the Vermont standards for preschool playground area. This is a draft of what it might look like. Trying to incorporate lots of different elements that will work well. Try to include some more inclusive play stuff for kids that might have physical impairments. The cost is going to be about $40,000. That includes the fence, the wood chips, a full installation, and all of the equipment here. We've currently raised to date about $15,000. A big chunk of that is from the PTO. There was also, I'm not sure if you want to go to the Excel spreadsheet, will show the rest of the funding. So 15,000 is obviously very short of 40,000, and so where we hope to make up that gap is through some further fundraising this year through the school and the community. And there's a Vermont recreational grants, facility grants, that will give up to $20,000 in matching funds. So we're hoping to raise at least 5,000 more over the course of this year to reach 20, apply for the grant in July, and in the fall, hopefully receive some funds that we need to close the gap. And then if all of that works, we would actually break ground in the fall, next fall in 2020. So these are the local organizations and businesses that have donated so far. Hopefully that'll keep going. But that's where we're at. Mr. Badeau just asked me to come and sort of let the board know so that if you've heard about it or had any other ideas. We are working also with Rise Vermont, people to make that suggestion. So they will, the way that they can support us is through a mini grant for one of those pieces of equipment, which would be up to $1,500. So I'm in touch with the person that coordinates for Berkshire, and we'll time that to make sure that that happens. I'm open to any other suggestions. My name is Emily Grims, and I'm actually a speech pathologist at Enosburg High School, so you can always find me with the standard email nomenclature. So if you wanted to get in touch with me about that, you're more than welcome to. Does anybody have questions?
I have a question. You said there's no groundwork
Yeah, so
like they have to dig. They have to anchor,
all they
right?
have to do is take the sod off. There's no major giant equipment leveling. He said that between the wood chips and the way that it's set right now, he actually came out to the site visit, and he said that he wouldn't need to do any big equipment.
But my question is, he's got to sink anchors in the ground there.
Yes.
So there's water that comes through there. So you just have to be careful about what's underneath.
Right.
Right there.
We, where the water that's planned to run off from the school or to run towards the, it's late in the day at the moment, to the well, that's set up where the water runs away from the building, all that's not on that side.
Water line, I mean.
Oh, okay.
There's a water line that comes from the road through there, and we can look at the map together. But there's just some buried stuff back there they'll need to know to avoid.
Right.
Or it might cost more than 40.
But I think we'll have to look into it. I think the indication of what he was saying is that they weren't necessarily going to be going too deep underneath the surface for anything, so it wouldn't necessarily impact anything that could be.
You're about 4 feet below the surface is where that water line
Okay.
is. So I think he's gonna have to anchor, he's gonna anchor below the frost line. So we can talk.
Yeah.
We'll talk more, but just, we need to be mindful that the location will need to be super deliberate right there.
Right.
So there's some stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. I think, Emily, you are our only visitor? Yes.
I just have a question
Sure.
because I'm just still learning how everything works. So like our playgrounds typically only funded through fundraising efforts and PTOs and that sorts of thing, or is there ever funds and budgets for that sort of thing?
I'd say it's been a mix.
Yeah.
We've used capital reserve funds in the past. We at the SU have chased after a few grants. I think for the Bakersfield renovation, we got some money from Visbit for that as well. And then as part of the budget planning process, you can certainly have that in there. And if we get to the point where you've got a facilities manager sort of overseeing everything, that could be part of a kind of ongoing capital repair campaign. Because that stuff does break and
Yeah, at this
wear
point,
out.
do people inspect our playgrounds like on a regular basis, or how is that?
They do. I wouldn't say it's regular, but they do inspect. Yeah.
And because this is early childhood, I expect there are more rules, regulations, and inspections that are
That will be
regulated.
inspected annually because it's part of the pre-K program.
And in this situation, I hadn't gone down the process of using local funds because it's not necessarily a must-have as far as what we have for the pre-K kiddos now. What we currently have is sufficient, but it's not ideal, it's not preferable. So that was sort of why I wasn't really looking to fund it via local funds.
And I am a big fan of letting folks fundraise and swooping in at the end if they need a little
Yeah.
help to make it to the
See how
finish
far
line.
they can get first.
Yeah.
Yep.
Instead of saying, no, let us
Right.
fund that for you, you know, like, I mean, you guys have made some really great progress already. So, I mean, 15,000 is nothing to, slip your nose at. So good job so far.
And you said they'll match, once you get to 20, you have someone that will match?
So the way that it
Will
works
last
is
20?
they will match up to 20. And historically, like I looked at the grants that they did award last year, they don't typically offer you the full amount. So if we raise 20 and we ask for 20 with a lot of good justification, maybe they'll give us 15 or 17. But they want the project to be shovel ready, and they want it to be the last gap funding measure. So that's why we didn't apply for it last summer, because we didn't have enough to show that they were going to make the difference for us to start the project. They want to be able to give you the money and have you start the project. So that's why we waited for another year.
Gotcha. Okay. School spotlight, we're doing that now. I forgot we've reorganized our agenda. Well, we're fresh and ready to learn all about what you have to offer, Christy, as opposed to in like 2 hours.
Yeah, so we're gonna walk around actually, and I'm gonna talk about, and I'm gonna focus on 2 things, our building renovation. So I'll point out some of the places where we will be doing some work, even though a lot of that will be outside and, some HVAC and things like that that you can't necessarily see, and then point out some of the things that we've done with our partnership with Rise Vermont. We don't have lockers, so all of the winter stuff, the coats and everything is out here in the hallway. This is our preschool. So this is our preschool room. We have a morning session and an afternoon session, so they're here 3 hours a day. Yesterday, our preschool participates with Rise Vermont as well. Betsy Fournier was actually here yesterday. They are at silver status, so there's a Facebook post about that today. Actually, on Facebook, we're doing, through the month of November, something that we're thankful or grateful for every day. So yesterday, we did a shout out to Carl Whedon, a local game warden, who did a hunter safety course for us through the after school program.
That's cool.
And they all passed.
Oh, even better.
So we have a number of new hunters. And today we did a shout out to Betsy and our partnership with Rise Vermont. And we just had pictures of her with preschool, so we posted those. So look for tomorrow and see what we're thankful for. I think it's gonna be coffee. It's a little dark to see, but we have two playgrounds, a pre-K 4 and 5 through 8 playground. So if you were able to see the playground as you came in, that's 5 through 8. This is pre-K 4 out here. And so they have access out this way. But like I said, it's a little bit too,
It's beautiful.
it's a little too dark to see. Oh, this is math intervention, so it's the same thing as literacy. It's a bigger room because it used to be the computer lab,
Oh, yeah.
right? Now all that is on carts, so we have repurposed. We actually did 8th grade math in here, or middle school math in here. It is a really good sized room, but not for middle school math. So there were 22 7th and 8th graders in this room, and that was a lot. It's a great intervention space. So one of the things that we did with our Rise Vermont money, because as a school, we had enough, we had an 80% participation rate, which meant that our 80%, it was more than that, but at least 80% of our teachers were involved working through Rise Vermont, most of them getting to silver or gold status, most of them getting to gold status. And so the school gets a little bit of money, and we did a sensory walk here, which is really fabulous. And it just makes us want, number one, more, and actually kind of nicer ones. So we're going to, keep that. I was bringing a parent down to a classroom, and she said, do you find that the kids just are all over the hallway when you have these? And I said, well, sometimes they are, which I think she thought was a really bad thing. And I didn't necessarily, but you will hear teachers go, get to hear and say, we're not doing a sensory walk on our way by this time. We will come out and do it later, or something like that. So they do get directions, because yes, it could be chaos here. But if there's someone going to the bathroom and they're the only one here, you know that they're doing it. Absolutely, as they should, right? So we have 2 kindergarten classrooms right here, and then 2 multi-age 3-4. Our numbers at each grade level are at least a class and a half. Sometimes closer to 2, but at least a class and a half, which means that Sheldon has historically done some multi-age classes so that we can flex if need be. So where we're multi-aging right now is at 3-4. So we have 3 3-4 classrooms. and this is one of them. If you come in, I'll show you something. Something else, not just one of these classrooms. Oh. One of the other things that we did with our Rise Vermont money is that we bought 2 under-table bikes for each classroom. And so if you have a student who really needs to be doing a lot while they're reading or doing their math, you can just put it under the chair. It's not very loud. It does, if you click the reset, it'll track how many rotations you've done. So sometimes there's a little like added challenge. These are in all of our classrooms, so every classroom was able to get 2.
Do they see a lot of usage?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do. I tried to put one under my desk, but my desk is too low. So my knees every time, which is super uncomfortable. So I'm still thinking about how I was
My third and fourth grade classroom.
Oh,
Mrs. Ruprecht was here many years ago.
The classrooms on this side of the building are all connected. So as you notice, there's our walls don't go to the ceiling, either in the hall or next door. And this year is the first full year that we've had doors on our classroom.
Yay!
We got those during Christmas break last year.
And why is, like, so my mom's family is from this town.
Yeah.
And I remember my cousins, when I was little, there was this discussion about like moving walls and stuff. And I was amazed by that as a little kid. Is this?
Yeah,
Attached to
so
that
these were not as high. Originally, these were not as high as they are now, right? So those were built up. And then you can almost see, right here is how big the doorway was. And there was a fireproof curtain.
Here, what
Had to
that
be fireproof.
the open classroom.
Yeah.
It's not set up like
Yeah.
the early 80s.
Yeah.
So we applied for a safety grant, which helped.
Get to the doors.
Yeah, because it's incredibly expensive to do that work.
Yeah, doors are expensive.
So the kids are super enthused about the doors.
So if you can come this way.
I don't remember having that.
Yeah.
I couldn't.
So part of our renovation will involve, renovating. Part of our renovation will involve this area right here. All of this is very old. As a matter of fact, I can see that sink is leaking right now. The plumbing is not easy to fix anymore. You can't get some of the parts. But this is an area that's used a lot by these classrooms down here with having the sink and a little bit of storage area. So this is in all of the classrooms that have this sink in between. This is part of the renovation.
So the sinks will just be renewed?
Yeah.
Outlook
And
or
the-
layout
and
will
the-
stay?
And the cupboards and the,
We'll put some locking
Yeah, some
cupboards as
locking.
well, some overhead cupboards, just to clean it up and to utilize the height, because as you can see, we have a lot going on.
storage issues, like most places, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Alright. both of these classrooms are, this one and the one that it's connected to are both kindergarten classrooms. We'll do the same renovation with the sink area, which looks just a little bit different here. A few years back, they asked for some shelves, so we put up some shelves there. So it's utilized slightly differently, but the same idea. Another part of the renovation, Reagan would not like it if I broke her stuff. Another part of our renovation is all of this area. As you can see, we have some faulty seals in the windows, but, and if you're over here, it's pretty cold. It's not very energy efficient anymore. And we had a safety audit a few years ago, and these windows there was a recommendation to change the way this is set up. This kind of window is easier to get into than some other things you could put here. And a full glass door is not necessarily, in terms of safety, the best choice. In terms of letting the light in, it's quite lovely. So we'll do a half window, we'll do a door with a half window on the top, and these windows will be changed out for something much more energy efficient and safe. And this heads out to, if I would step out, we would look over to preschool where we were. So this looks out onto the playground. So this is the rest of our sensory walk. This is called the Kiva area. We pull a lot of small groups out into this area. So there's
What area?
it's called Kiva.
Oh, okay.
So lots of storage, lots of books. There's a lot of small groups that are pulled out into this area. It could be a teacher bringing a student out, could be a pull-out service, or it could be a paraeducator who works, or sometimes a small book group. So this is a well-used area. Those are both first grade classrooms. These are both second grade classrooms. We're gonna step into this one, and I'll show you one other thing, and then we're done in this hallway.
So all the doors and windows on this wing? Okay.
Yeah, in the whole school.
Did you say second grade?
This is second grade. Yep. So it's the same design, same setup, looks out onto the playground over here. This area is a little bit, we're going to do the same kind of renovation. Cupboards, locking cupboards on the bottom, shelves on the top, new sink. And, but if you want to just take a look over here, this area looks a little different. As you can see, there's the wall does a triangle shape, and so there's a place to pull out back here too. So these rooms use that space a little differently.
Nice. I like that.
So they have a little less space in the classroom, but a little more usable space. This is actually the only one that has a door between the two rooms. I have no idea why that was added before I was here, but. So there was a little less. This floor is original to the building.
Which was built when?
In 1972. So this is original, and this is part of our renovation, so. Yeah, here and it's in that area as well. So our front office. The open concept extended to here too, as you can see, with the whole front office being open. As a matter of fact, this is all new since I've been here. There was not, it was really open. Yeah, and actually that half wall was new. So. We liked it. We really need more space. One of the big pieces of the renovation is the gym floor. I don't think it makes sense for us to go in there right now during one of the first few days of basketball practice, especially. And so if you want to take a look at it on your way out.
Can you describe what it is right now?
Yeah, so right now it is a floor very similar to this. It is tile on concrete. It's super hard.
Very
and
slippery.
Very slippery. And there's a huge crack down the middle of it that hasn't moved, like it hasn't shifted or done anything different. There's a huge crack and it's just stayed there just like that. We continue to wax over it and there's not been any change. When we've had it checked, they think they're just going to be able to, they believe they will just be able to dig it out, redo that section and then put floor over it. They don't think it's any kind of structural thing, but.
Is it gonna be the poured, rubberized kind of thing? Is that what's gonna go in?
I believe that's the plan.
So
Yeah, that's what we're looking at.
yeah, some research and.
Yep, it is. That is also our cafeteria. So our kitchen is over there. So it is a multi-purpose room used all day long and all evening long. So it does take a beating.
Sorry, Christy, did you say they're gonna put new flooring on top of this, or they remove
They're,
it? That's a
so-
project.
Yes. Yeah, this will be, and we have to do the asbestos abatement
Yeah.
in here, which is why they're pulling it up for sure.
Yeah.
One of the other things
They
is
know.
there's 2 bathrooms down there,
Right.
which are not ADA compliant, so
Yeah.
we're going to make both of those ADA compliant. So that's another big thing.
Yeah, and those must be the ones that get the most like sort of public usage
Yeah.
after by these.
Parents, public.
Yeah. Good plan.
All right, we're just gonna do the middle school side really quickly. It's the same kind of work that's gonna happen, the same doors in all the classrooms. We'll still do those throughout the building and new siding. The bathrooms are also original. We will do new floor and new fixtures.
It is.
Yeah, it's
retro.
it is very retro. It could be a little bit of both. We had a lighting audit, I think that's what it's called. And we have redone the lights in that side of the building, and this is the next side to do. So many of these classrooms are what is considered overlit. What we've done in some places is just take a few of the bulbs out as we're replacing with more energy efficient and less bright, I guess is how you would say it. In terms of Rise Vermont, our middle school classrooms also have a desk, a bike desk. Each of the classrooms in this side of the building have one of these. It's a little bit too big for our younger kids, so we haven't put them down there. But they use this quite often. Sometimes teacher it suggested, and sometimes student choice, a little bit of both. This side looks out, I don't know why this is odd. This is why we're getting new doors. This side looks out to a courtyard that backs up to the, not a forest, but quite a bit of woods out here. But this is a courtyard that our middle school students use frequently. They have like Adirondack chairs, the plastic, I don't know what it's called, PVC, whatever. They have plastic Adirondack chairs and they have class out there. It's a nice space for them. And you're welcome to, poke in some of the other rooms, but in terms of our building project, I think that's about it. So down the rest of the hall is middle school social so this was middle school math. 6, 7, 8 is all taught by our middle school team. So math, social studies, language arts, and then science at the end. This is a grade 5 classroom, The one that you can see, the blue on the wall, is our 3-4 group that is down here. And they're doing a great job. And that might be the one you want to run in and take a look at. Yeah, sure. And then our art room and our science room at the end. So, and that door opens up to that side parking lot.
Thank you so much, Christy. You're welcome. Even though apparently it's just like it was like 3 years ago. 20. I'm sorry. It was the first time for some of us, so I appreciate it. As a mom of a basketball player, I hadn't gotten beyond the gym.
Yeah,
So.
a lot of people haven't.
Yeah. Okay. All right, you ready for me? Yes. All right. I'm trying to drive from over. I was gonna. Okay.
So, the superintendent report for you today, we're gonna start out with personnel. I think I'm driving from, I have to turn it on. Yes.
There you go.
There's our agenda today. I have nothing under student. The rest we're gonna talk about. I tried to weave in some what's happened in NMV throughout the month, so you'll see some pictures of our schools. So we have a retirement notification. So I have spoken with Lynn Loffer, who is the librarian here in Sheldon, and she would like to retire effective January 1st. And her rationale is she has found increasingly she's been called upon to help with some family health concerns. Lynn has been here, a devoted employee for over 20 years. So I would certainly encourage you to approve her request. For me, certainly, and I'm sure for Christy, it would be regrettably, but I think that at this point, you should honor her request.
Sorry, thank you.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Everyone in favor? Any additional comments?
Can I just ask a question? How, as far as then replacing her, a pretty important position on such short notice?
We're going to talk about that in the next piece. We're going to talk about the hiring.
Okay.
Can someone tell me who made the motion?
I just said thank you.
Okay, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you.
So there's some hiring pieces and the plan for refilling this will come under that. The first is Sheldon and Bakersfield. We did not get a chance to talk. I wrote that wrong, didn't I? It is, and Lisa pointed that out, and I still said it wrong, Lisa.
It's okay, as long as I'm not reading something.
It is Montgomery and Bakersfield. I don't believe we have action that they're not ready to hire yet, correct? Rhoda?
What?
Have you hired?
For hiring our
Yeah.
temp personnel?
Okay.
Well, not ready yet.
So, wasn't sure where we would be. In terms of the mid-year hire, Christine and I have talked. There's a library program at UVM, and there are some people in that program currently. It will be complicated to find someone to fill this position. However, because we're hiring after July 1, in our master agreement, we're going to be looking to fill for just the remainder of the year and then reopen this spring. So we could get someone under a provisional endorsement if they're not finished. And I know that Christy has at least one lead that she is going to hunt down, and we're going to actually advertise for this tomorrow. I wanted to come here before we posted the advertisement.
And it's not one FTE, correct? It's a partial?
No, it's one.
Oh, it is full one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just library, or do they do, is the position just library, or do they do like intervention?
No, they don't do intervention, but that is a
Would
possibility.
be a, okay,
Yeah.
would be a positive.
Yep.
Any other questions on that?
The position does teach pre-K through 8, though, so there are. She sees classes.
I should ask.
Okay, the next piece under hiring is last year when we filled the Bakersfield principal position, Rhoda was hired as a one-year interim. So the board was very clear that they wanted to do a full search. That happened at the very end of the year, so the process was rather quick. We were thankful to get Rhoda. So we need a timeline for what we're going to do in terms of that principal search. So I've written a draft timeline that I want to share with you and get your feedback on it.
Was that board decision the Bakersfield Berkshire board at the time?
It was Bakersfield.
It was
Bakersfield,
just Bakersfield. Okay, I thought so. But how did that happen? Were they still operational?
Yes, they were.
Thank you.
So my intention is to do this rather aggressively in terms of the timeline. So I would want to post the position just before the holidays and then work through some of the steps. These are all of the steps in a principal hiring process. So you can see that it's quite comprehensive. The goal on this timeline would be to try to have those final interviews before the February vacation. So there's a January 22nd date in there. What I've seen happen before is sometimes you could be too early. Early is good, but sometimes you're too early. So if by January 22nd we look at the candidate pool and we do not have an adequate number of candidates, I would probably make a recommendation to the board that we post that back to the top of School Spring so that more people can see it, and then push this back out into the middle of March. So for right now, if we get adequate candidates, the intention would be to begin moving forward in January. Thoughts or questions?
This board gets to decide who will be on the screening committee in January. That's your first order of business, basically.
Like, I think yes.
That was a lot of words to say.
I
Yes.
know.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay.
It's been a rather long day. I think the makeup, would be appropriate. I think the actual people we should try
Yeah.
to be
That
pretty.
this board decides who will be on the committee.
Yes.
Yeah. And it could be
You might
parent
say,
or
we
PTO.
want at least 2 parents, we want to have,
Yeah.
staff members that represent at least this and this.
Yep.
And then give me some leeway to try to find the right people.
Yep.
To fill that. That way we're not coming back and forth with well, that person said no and they can't do it, so let's go to this one.
Yeah.
So I think it's best if the board helps to give some guidance about what do you want it to represent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other questions?
We talked about this before, but I think it's fairly aggressive, but I think it's a good plan.
Okay. before we get into the moving piece, I'll bring it back to the board and say, this is what we have. I think we're ready to move, or we should repop this onto school spring in January.
Yep.
Okay. All right. That's not a good sign. Nothing under student. I do have a request from the union. So this year there was a lot of work that the union had to do in terms of how many new bargaining units, not really bargaining units, but groups who joined the bargaining unit. So the union came and asked to have a little extra time for sending in the payroll deduction authorizations for association dues. So what this is essentially just saying, instead of October 15th, they're requesting November 1st. So we're beyond this, but the request came in before the October 15th deadline, but it was after your last
Board
meeting.
right.
So if you are okay, make a motion to accept the union's request and have Jean Marie sign that, if you would.
I can make the motion to accept it.
All in favor signify, any discussion? Sorry. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I sent out this month an article purposely because we're about to embark on our first budget process as a merged board. So I think that there is some background information, some knowledge that I want us to build together. So did you all have an opportunity to read the article, Equity and Equality? I chose one that was very short. I hope you noticed that. What were people's reactions to the article?
It almost felt to me like it was an all or nothing.
What do you mean?
I don't know if it ended with the sentence or it had it in there that, or maybe you inserted it, that our goal should be to put the resources where they're needed the most, and that to me felt like it was leaving out the other end of the spectrum, and I'm a long time proponent of pushing all children to succeed above and beyond what the expectations are. And it felt to me like, oh no, we're gonna concentrate all our resources in one area and the other area is just gonna, those kids are just gonna skate. So.
Did others have that same impression?
You mean like the kids that excel, yeah, that wouldn't be given the opportunity? Yeah, I'm saying yes because I know that's been your soapbox as long as I've known you. Not challenging those kids that are already achieving or overachieving has been Lisa's jam.
Right.
I didn't get that impression.
Is not a bad jam. I want to make sure that we say that. Like it is, I agree. I think that the whole point is to get us to understand the difference between equal and equity, right? Because we have some different differences between each of our schools. So if we look at this puzzle that we're about to embark on together and say, everybody gets this, and everybody gets this, and everybody gets this, that's about equality, where it's about getting exactly the same thing into every single building. Really, there should be an analysis of need, an analysis of scale, right? And looking at the needs of the population you're serving as well. So I feel like there's room. It's not about giving nothing to the other end of the spectrum. We have to be super mindful about making sure that we are putting things in place to level out the playing field for those kids who have had less opportunity than some of the other kids who come from more advantaged.
So on that note, I would really be in favor of doing that on a school by school basis, not on a student by student basis. So if, for instance, we identified a school as being very low performing and really needing a lot of resources compared to a neighboring school across the county or across the supervisory union, and pouring resources into that school to bring it up, to level the playing field. I'm fine with that, and I've advocated for that in the past. So I just want to be clear that it's not about, I don't like it being about students being weighed against each other, but I do like it. I do like the idea of weighing schools against each other and what students have for opportunity at one school versus another school of a similar grade configuration, like a pre-K through 8, for instance.
I know that the language you just used wasn't deliberate. I want to bring out a word that I heard you use a couple times, against. So I want us to be really mindful about the word, because this is a partnership, and I know that's not what your message was, but we have people who aren't here tonight, and I want to make sure that we're providing clarity. This is not about one school being against another. Like, I look at these principals now as being in a partnership with one another, like I look at all of you being in a partnership with one another. And the resources we have in any given school, we have to look at what we have and what we need as well. And we have to look at, is there something that Lenny has in Berkshire that he isn't currently in need of, either a physical or a human resource, and is there a way for us to spread some of that out if the need demonstrates that? In terms of the individual student part, we wouldn't ever really have that conversation at this level. That would be for the principals to tune that. That's more at the building level if there are needs in terms of services for individual students. So that's really not what we would push too much on in terms of budget.
Yeah, I think you're construing something out of my use of against. I just meant it in a weighing, like on scales, not us versus them.
Yeah, I know that's what you meant. I wanted to make sure to provide clarity. I know you well enough to know that's not what you were trying to say. Anything else?
I just want to chime in. I think when you use the word need, I think what one school or population might perceive a need in what another, or what this group, I think we need to be really, really careful and mindful of that moving forward. This has been kind of up and down, nerve-wracking, especially, us being individual communities and schools now being one. I think what one school says we need and what another school might say, well, you don't need that, we need that. I think it's really going to be just to lay some good ground rules, because as we know, there are going to be some challenging discussions.
Absolutely.
And it's probably going to get heavy from time to time, and just to be respectful of that.
The principals have already started to have some of these conversations, and I feel like we're working towards that in the principal group as well, of being really mindful of not trying to judge where anybody is at in the moment and what we have, but there's also a place where we need to get where we're transparent with one another, because I think it's very easy for us in this new partnership to make assumptions, because there's all kinds of information that has been out and about through this Act 46 process about who's going to lose out on what. I think that it is one way to look at it. Opportunity is the other way to look at it. It's not always just about the cutting piece. It's about, are we using things as in a way that maximizes our potential, or do we have opportunities? Do we have ways to look at something differently and shift maybe something that we have been doing to make it more meaningful for kids? So I agree with you. We need to be really careful about that. And I'm doing this pre-work because Morgan's about to make things really transparent. So he's going to give you some of the data that the principals have already started to study. So you're going to get to take a peek at staffing levels and student levels, because just like these principal spotlights where you get to kind of peek behind the curtain and see what is what's happening in each of these schools, the data also is a peek inside the curtain to get a sense of what's going on. Okay, so there's conversations around equity and equality aren't just about merge work. Equity and equality are definitely conversations that are happening throughout our country and our state. We're having a lot of conversations around equity. A lot of times people think about equity in terms of race. I think that that is definitely an important part of this conversation, and there are other factors also that weigh into the idea of equity. In a conference I went to a while back, there was a video that was one of the most powerful representations of the importance of equity that I've ever seen. So I've talked this through with Jean Marie when we had our pre-meeting. So I'm going to ask you to watch this really short video. I promise it's like 3 minutes. Before we get there, there's a visual. Sorry, I forgot about this. This is that idea of equality. Everybody gets exactly the same thing. The tricky part here is they don't all have the same need to be able to see the game. In terms of equity, it's about giving everybody what they need. This person could already see the game, so he doesn't really need a stool there. This gave everybody what they need. The reality is there are some people that have a lot of privilege, a lot of things going on, and they have a really high view from where they're at, and there are some people that are starting like in a hole almost. So this visual is about how can we make it so that everybody can have the opportunity that they need, because what we want at the end of this is for our kids to have whatever they need to be successful and have whatever future it is that they're imagining. That's our job.
Lynn, can I just say one thing about that visual?
Yeah.
Because that helped me to understand, but it also might help you all to understand where my original comment was coming from. Reality can also be the person who has very great potential, needs a lot, but no one is seeing that because they're looking at the equity and that person can already see the game. But yet they have a lot of needs that might be hidden to everyone else, and they may need a lot of resources that aren't easily identifiable because maybe they have a great potential to do something, or they have the potential that there's something missing in their supposed privileged upbringing, or
More
whatever
enrichment.
you're called.
Is that
Absolutely,
more
yes.
enrichment? Yeah.
Yeah, even though they may not appear to need that, they may actually very much need that. So in terms of those 4 boxes, I don't think everybody fits into one of those 4 boxes.
If you're looking
Just
at
throwing it out
it,
there.
I hear what you're saying. I think that where I'm trying to get you is the conceptual place of what this represents within systems. And I'm hearing you very clearly, like, don't forget about the kids who have the advantages that are visible. I'm hearing that. I'm hearing
Right.
that still have the opportunity for those kids to have enrichment opportunities and to have extensions and to still be paid. We're not saying like don't pay attention to those kids, don't give them rich learning experiences
And
at all.
even supports, maybe they need emotional support, maybe they need greater social supports for whatever reason that they may not fit in with their peers, because we do talk about that a lot. We give a lot of emotional and behavioral support to students who are outwardly not comfortable in their surroundings. But anyway, that's my soapbox for tonight.
So Lisa, how many years have we been doing this together?
Long time.
I'm thinking 15. So I would hope that you know that I really try not to forget about this kid.
Yeah,
And that
no,
we're
I know that.
definitely
It's
paying
just
attention
within
to
the
that.
framework of public education, it is easy to start overlooking those situations.
I can
and
assure
let
you,
them
we won't
skate.
forget about that kid. I want to bring you to this place where we're tuning into the reality of what might not be visible for some of you in terms of what some of our students are dealing with. The video that I'm about to show you is powerful. And as you're watching the video, I want you to think about how does this knowledge, this understanding that you're going to get from seeing this, impact you and the work that you have to do as you govern this newly merged district. I'm wondering if you would mind pushing play on that just with the little mouse. Oh, I'm not plugged in, Christy. How do I do that?
It's going. Oh, but the sound.
Before I say go, I'm gonna make a couple.
I was able to project before with sound. What do I have to do with the trick? Okay. Does it not come through this? No? There's no sound thing?
Usually, no.
Okay.
I mean,
Is it loud enough?
Yeah, it was okay.
Are you gonna be able to hear it?
I'm sorry, Lynn, I could have.
No
marked out
worries.
some.
I didn't really tip you that I was gonna do a video.
I
Okay.
did see it in the chat.
It's one of those things as I'm prepping from things, I tell myself, remember, you gotta attend to the audio, and until I get to that part, I forget.
Trace, we'll take this. It's a $100 bill. Before I say go, I'm gonna make a couple statements. If those statements apply to you, I want you to take 2 steps forward. If those statements don't apply to you, I want you to stay right where you're at. Take 2 steps forward if both of your parents are still married. Take 2 steps forward if you grew up with a father figure in the home. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a private education. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a free tutor growing up. Take 2 steps forward if you've never had to worry about your cell phone being shut off. Take 2 steps forward if you've never had to help mom or dad with the bills. Take 2 steps forward if it wasn't because of your athletic ability, you don't have to pay for college. Take 2 steps forward if you never wondered where your next meal was going to come from. I want you guys up here in the front just to turn around and look. Every statement I've made has nothing to do with anything any of you have done. Has nothing to do with decisions you've made. Everything I've said has nothing to do with what you've done. We all know these people up here have a better opportunity to win this $100. Does that mean these people back here can't race? No. We would be foolish to not realize we've been given more opportunity. We don't want to recognize that we've been given a head start. But the reality is we have. Now, there's no excuse. They still got to run their race. You still got to run your race. But whoever wins this $100, I think it'd be extremely foolish of you not to utilize that and learn more about somebody else's story. Because the reality is, if this was a fair race and everybody was back on that line, I guarantee you some of these black dudes would smoke all of you. And it's only because you have this big of a head start that you're possibly going to win this race called life. That is a picture of life, ladies and gentlemen. Nothing you've done has put you in the lead that you're in right now. When I say go, on your mark, get set, go! From this activity, you're a fool.
Did he really just say what I thought he said? That about the black kids?
He did. I want you to
I thought
think
the
about
same thing. I didn't know if I heard it right.
Yeah, that's pretty offensive.
But that's who was standing on the line.
Yeah, but still.
I would
That
like
has
us to think
nothing
about
to do
the-
with your running ability.
No.
I understand that. I don't want us to focus on that part. There was power in the rest of the video, and I chose to show this even though that piece was in there. I want us to think about our reaction to what was the message in the video. What is your reaction?
the message is that people are privileged and get ahead because of their privilege. But my answer to that is if you are given privilege, you also hold a lot of responsibility to your fellow man. And to those who are given privilege, there is great responsibility. And I've only said one thing in public at the State House, and that's exactly what I said when we had implicit bias training. So that's all I'm going to say about that video.
I think the issue there is that I think I completely agree with you, and I think probably everyone in this room agrees with you, but I think systemically and historically, no one, or not enough of us, have owned that belief.
I'm sure that's true.
And that's the real problem. Because if everyone did utilize all of their advantages to help their fellow man, we wouldn't have a lot of the conversations we have to have every day. So then it's up to us. It is up to us to respond to that. And I think you're doing the exact right thing with all the work that you do and the fights that you put up. And that's the same challenge that we have in our schools, is that we have to own that reality. We can't back away from that reality. And sometimes it does require some hard conversations about recognizing the lack of privileges that certain people have, and whether that has to do with certain things, such as race or poverty or whatever. But one of the things we haven't done enough of is be honest about it and have very harsh conversations about it. I think the hard part that I see you feel, and I think a lot of us do talk sometimes, is like getting attacked because of our privilege or labeling those who don't have that privilege. I don't think that's what anyone wants out of it, but at the same time, it has to start with being fully transparent and aware of it. Because if you aren't, you miss out on the opportunities that you need to step up, or we need to step up to address.
So do you think that's happening in education and administration, or do you think that's just a societal issue?
I think we are trying to address that, but I think the problem lies in the fact that I like that one of the really cool things about the slide, the 4-picture slide that Lynn had, is we have that conversation about equity where we're giving kids a different amount of boxes, but what we're trying to really work at is that liberation piece. And that's the really cool work we're trying to do around UDL and restorative practices. And it's like, there are things that we have in our system, our educational systems, that through no intention by anybody, that creates those barriers to access to learning. And if we can get rid of those barriers, a lot of equity will be happening anyway. And some of that is stuff that we don't even realize, as far as our instructional practices, as far as our content expectations, and we have to be thoughtful about that.
I also think intervening and recognizing when intervention is necessary for these kids who might not be at an advantage like the other children a lot earlier. And I think that's one of the things that when we bring it more on a smaller level, that, I mean, if we have resources as an educational system here, that we know there's a group of students in Sheldon or Berkshire, what have you, that really need a boost to be in that race, so to speak. And I think on a more of a micro level, that's how I'm relating that video to the situation we're in here and now.
Personally, that video, I've seen it before. It hits me very hard. And very personally, I grew up very privileged in this exact town, and my husband did not. And I've seen the exact opposite scenario and what he went through and what he lived trying to get an education, living in a place where there wasn't public education. And from what I know of what he went through, and I know exists in our communities, there's kids coming to school so hungry they can't focus to learn. I almost think, we're kind of going at this pretty aggressively on like thinking about what these kids need. Some of it is so basic. And I think that, you need to also remember that, like really basic things that they need: clean clothes, being able to feel confident to come to school, food. I mean, you need those things to be able to sit at a table and then learn. So before you even get to the piece about what type of education you're providing them, some of these kids are so far down in those holes that they can't even get to the table. So I think that that's kind of something that some of us should, just remember, that it's pretty significant.
Yeah, and all of our
and what some of these children are going through.
Yep. And I think there are, speaking from the perspective of a person who has a whole lot of privileges and grew up in a family with a whole lot of privileges, like when that is your norm and that's the circle that's sort of the pool that you swim in, you don't recognize, you have no idea the privileges that you have, and that's the thing that is, as my dad would say, sort of the older you get, the more you learn and the more you recognize, like 20 years ago, this was not even a conversation that we had, right? But so it isn't something that I was aware of in sort of my daily growth, but it's also something that now as a parent, I work towards with my kids. Like they're very blessed with, like travel, like they've had all kinds of really great experiences, but making them connect the dots between where you're at and where some of your counterparts are or are not, and just ingraining that level of awareness in folks, because I can speak very openly. So I had none for a long time, right?
I like that he pointed that out several times to the kids that were moving forward. He kept telling them nothing that you've done. Well, I mean, telling all of them, but
got you there.
Like nothing you've done has gotten you here, whether you're ahead or still back at the line.
Yeah.
It was interesting because I had a lot of the same feelings, or some of the same feelings, I think, and I'm projecting, like there were some things that you didn't like about how his tone and stuff, and I was like, being a little bit off here, but then like I came around to also seeing like he had a message, but he also like the end of all of them pulling together. I was like, oh, okay, so he's not doing the thing where he's shaming those who have privilege or shaming those who aren't. He was really trying to heighten awareness and then bring us all together. And I think that's one of the pieces that we're all trying to do here. And the other way I think about that same thing, this was back when I was in Louisville, a cultural competency thing from, I forget what the guy's name is, Howard something or other, and it was really cool. And one of the things he had us all do was like write down like all the things, like traits and characteristics of like successful students, and you start writing out all the things of like your perfect kiddos, the kids that do really well in school. And then he pointed out how many of those things have to do with stuff that happens before they walk into the school building, and it's that like all those kids that are front loaded for success, but then we expect the kids who are front load for failure to act just like the ones who are front load for success. So then the question is, what do we need to do? What do we need to put in place to support and nurture? And that could be a kid. Some of those things could be a kid who has a lot of privileges in some ways, but is coming in not ready to learn too. It's just being mindful of the whole child and the opportunities we are obligated to respond to, because if we don't, they're not going to be successful.
Well, that's the other thing that I was thinking, that when I was in elementary school, I feel like we walked in and were taught things, right? Like I feel now, particularly as a board member, I think there's like this whole sphere of influence that that we are all working towards providing to these children that's beyond teaching them letters and numbers and how to read, right? It's like making sure that they have access to free breakfast and healthy snacks while they're here. All of those pieces that's like, wow, like it isn't education. It's like this whole sort of social services spectrum. Like, and they come in with this cadre of problems that you have no idea that they're even walking in the door with. So it feels like our system, our education system is so far beyond just education. And I think as a privileged parent of privileged children, I didn't think about that until I really began to sit at this table and think about where all those other kids are coming from.
Can I say one thing? It's an excellent conversation and all of it really resonates with me. I do want to just put a little plug in that we don't want to assume that those metrics of privilege that he outlined mean that those kids don't have struggles, trauma, that that's a construct that just by virtue of your parents are still together, you go to private school, you don't have to worry about where your next meal is coming from. It doesn't necessarily mean that those kids aren't dealing with their own traumas.
I'm glad you said that, because that's exactly, I was going to chime in that all kids in general are coming, no matter where they're coming from, trauma is all around them, and we're dealing with a whole generation of kids that just are struggling, whether it's social media or whatever it is, and it really is hitting every level, every aspect, every child. So being mindful that you can't just assume that anyone is not touched by trauma.
And affluence is not a guarantee of a trauma-free existence, is really what I was trying to say. If we're looking at socioeconomic, I mean, we can separate that out some from, issues of race and equity for sure, but it's an unfair and inaccurate assumption to say that just by virtue of someone coming from a family that is, is financially secure, that they do not experience trauma.
I agree completely. There are kids from all spectrums that have traumas that could be in or outside of the home. And I don't want you to think that this is like we're not going to pay attention to kids with privilege. Like no one is I don't want you to walk away with a message that those kids are not important. Those kids out there in the front, they still have needs. The point is, like, what are we doing for those kids that are in the front, but also those kids in the back? Because everybody around this table, I mean, I'm not going to ask you to all say it because we've all grown up in a different way, but if you really think about your own privilege, this is something like this puts people into an uncomfortable place when we all start thinking about our own privilege, and we're the people who are leading, we're the people who are looking at what are the needs of our whole organization. And without us looking at our privilege and looking at historically disadvantaged populations of students, we could be really missing something. I just want to say one last thing. There was one little part of that video when he actually said go, and kids started running, and the camera spanned through the kids who hadn't really moved forward much. And did anybody notice what some of them chose to do?
Not to run.
They didn't start, right?
Yeah.
They'd
already put their backpacks on.
Yeah. Because guess what? They knew they were not going to win the race. So that's the point. Like, I don't want us to forget about that. Like, there are kids who are coming in, and sometimes we can, as a society, look at that and say they're struggling. What's wrong with them, right? And I think we have to be really careful about that, because I think that we're better off to look at it in terms of the lens of what's happened to them and what can we do to support them. Because what we want is, no matter, like your example, no matter what the start was that you got, you want to see every kid crossing that finish line. Our job is to ensure that we eliminate some of the barriers that are in front of them so that they have the tools they need to cross that finish line. So that's kind of the point in sharing this video. And I know it probably won't be the last time. If you go to any trainings around education in the state, that you'll hear conversations about this. It probably won't be the last time we engage in some discussions about this. And I hope it made you think about some things.
I also think it's important to point out that he didn't get rid of the race, right? So they still raced, and he didn't change the finish line for people. So some of those things are not within our power to change for kids. This is what it means to graduate high school. These are the things you have to do. And while we're trying to put supports and instruction and get rid of some barriers, we're not moving the line for people. And I think that is sometimes a misunderstanding, that people who are looking in at interventions and supports and programming and things, that there is a misperception that there is a line that's being moved for people because they won't reach it, right? As opposed to putting in scaffolding to get them there.
So that would be too late if you're going to move the finish line closer. That's too late in a child's life. There's far too little being done for children before they come to school so that they can come here to be ready to learn, because we're education administration. We're not social services. We're not mental health. We're not any of those people. And that really shouldn't be our job, although it is. And that is something that has been disturbing to me for a number of years, but even more so now that I see what happens in terms of legislation. We have the education system with rules. We have the Health and Human Services arm. And until those two groups work together, I don't think we're going to have a whole lot of success. And we need to focus much more on people who are becoming parents and teaching them how to be good parents to their children and to try to work together as a family unit, whether they live together or not, so that kids can come to this place and be ready to learn. We're trying to pick up the pieces that have already fallen apart. And that, I think, is going to be a really difficult, almost impossible job for us. And this is it's a great exercise, and it's a great goal to have, that we're going to have equity. But until we get to the root of what's really happening, then I don't think we're going to actually achieve equity. We're going to work really hard to make sure all of our schools in this supervisory union are equitable. But I don't know how much more we can do, what more we can change to make that happen, because we're already supporting children in so many ways. But outside forces, meaning human services, have to help us. We don't have the money, the staff, or the time, and it's already almost too late in some situations.
I very much agree with you, and the arm of human service and social service, and I have to say that I feel very fortunate in Franklin, Grand Isle County, Chittenden County, that in terms of the early intervention and the supports that are truly team efforts, community partners. We here have some pretty strong partners in those realms, and the early intervention, the services offered through human service agencies locally, at least for us in our communities, are huge. They're effective, they're visible, they're there, they're 100% embedded in all of our federally qualified health centers. So I don't, especially being on TV, I just think it's valuable to say that in our community that I can speak to, we have close and valuable partnerships, making a difference every day.
And I will point out that Franklin Grand Isle has the only remaining partnership group that meets on a monthly basis in the state of Vermont.
Correct.
All of the others have dissolved.
Correct.
And they're all going and doing their own thing in their own silos. Mm-hmm. So this is something really to be quite proud of in this area, for the folks who make the effort to get together and talk to each other and collaborate every month.
So that was the question I asked you to think about in terms of us moving into the work around budget. And I had some other pictures that I just really wanted to use. So there's 4 extra pictures that you're going to see up there. There are 2 pictures there, but I'm not sure why they're not loading. So I'm actually done my part. We're going to move on to Morgan.
Okay. Ready, Morgan?
This is like,
What?
this is for the end of your part, right?
District data analysis.
Data.
It's him. He's going to do it.
You both like to drive.
Morgan, do you have printouts so we don't have to look sideways with this budget?
For the budget, I do.
Okay.
For this pre-stuff, I don't think we'll be together.
Okay.
So this is some work that we've been doing at central office around trying to gather the data of the kids and the adults that we have in our districts now and come up with a way to present it both internally and present it to you to get an idea of what that means and what's really going on in each of our partner schools. So this first tab is number of kids in our buildings. So you'll see we've got it split out by grade. And I'll scan over here to the side and give you an idea of how many kids total we have in our buildings. So this is October 1 enrollment information, and assuming that we find this useful, we'll update that every year going forward. But PK to 12, Bakersfield had 139 kids, Berkshire 214, Montgomery 142, Sheldon 290, and so a total of 785 across the district. So I don't know for board members if those numbers line up with what you might have thought about the schools that you're less familiar with. But that's who was in our buildings or who should have been in our buildings on October 1st.
I think the Bakersfield number continues to go down. I feel like we were at like 165 when I
think there's
many
no
years ago.
strong trend line anywhere, but I
Yeah.
think Bakersfield has been overall drifting down.
Declining a little, yeah.
Has Montgomery gained students? I didn't know Montgomery had so many kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, up and down.
It kind of seems to fluctuate between like 130, mid 130s and low 140s.
And so did the same thing for adults. I'm not yet sure how we're going to push this out to boards, but we've got people as well as I've been able to define by their content area. So for the early grades, it's pretty easy, and I'm using this as a device to make sure that we haven't forgotten anybody in your budget. So we've got teachers' names there, but you can see that for the most part in the K through 5 grades, the 3 smaller schools have a person per grade. Sheldon has 2 people per grade. Berkshire's got a big class here. Where I've got, I think it's a split 3-4. So it's 3 people across 3rd, 4th, and then the same in Sheldon. Going across, specials would be art, music, gym, and then your 6th through 8, English language, humanities, math, science. We've also got data on folks who aren't necessarily in your budget, like special educators and SLPs, but trying to get a rough idea of where they're spending their time in each of the buildings. We've got interventionists and coaches. This is a blend. Some of these folks are in your local budget, and some of them are funded through the CFP grant at the SU. Pulled out early ed separately, and then student support, so nurses, tech folks, guidance, SAP, homeschool coordinator, and then admin's principal, which is pretty easy for this side. We've got also the folks that are maybe hired from NCSS or other outside agencies. So school-based clinician, behavior consultants, and then CAT and autism workers who tend to be one-on-ones there. And then paraeducators that we hire, both folks who are one-on-ones, small group or general ed, paras, and then early ed. Your admin secretary, SRO, ADs, you don't really have.
Do they have SROs
down to your
at the
custodial
high
support.
schools?
Both high schools have
Have one.
SRO. And eventually we'll get food service in there as well. We had got the columns, but we didn't have time to get the people in there.
So like, we have an AD, Sheldon, you have an AD, right? But like they do other things, is it, why they're in a
Yeah,
different
so I'm
category?
only
Yeah.
really counting people
Yeah.
who are there as part of
Just
a full-time
Yeah, okay,
equivalent.
gotcha.
So Isper, for example, has a full-time AD, and that's all he does.
Yeah, right.
So a lot of data there. I don't know how much time you want to be spending
Can
on
you go to
that.
the, I just want to see the total number of people.
So here are
Oh,
all
it's
the
there, oh yeah,
adults.
okay, thank you.
And I pushed this out to principals fairly recently, so we're doing some tweaking both. There may be some folks I missed, or we may not have the categories exactly right, especially for folks who are spending some of their time in the classroom and some of the time as an interventionist or as a coach. We've really dug into it in terms of each of these different categories, but I'll just show you what we're looking at in terms of ratios. So this is the number of students per each licensed adult, so that would be your teachers, special ed, principals, for your non-licensed folks, which would be primarily your paraeducators, but also custodians and eventually food service folks will be in there. And then contracted, so those NCSS workers, cat and autism folks. So this isn't how many you have, this is the number of kids per each person. And then this is the total for all adults. So on this side, we've got an average of 4.5 kids per adult.
Can you explain the contracted in Montgomery's number? That looks huge. What's the deal with that?
Because they have
very
only
few
one
contracted workers.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
That's the same question.
Yeah, so the bigger
Yeah,
this number, the fewer the
yeah,
adults in that category. At least adults per kid. And so we put this up here and because there's been conversation out of the Scott administration over the last couple of years around giving a student to adult target and tying budgets and taxes to that. It's never really gotten any legs because I think nobody can agree on how to count adults or which adults to count.
Right.
But for those of you who have been in this long enough to remember challenges for change out of the Douglas administration, sometimes just because an idea isn't well thought out doesn't mean that it doesn't pass and that you have to deal with it in a kind of sudden way. So we don't want anybody to get too worried, but we ran figures to say if you needed to get to 5 kids per adult, what that would mean in terms of staffing. And so what this is telling us is that if they're counting all the people that we're counting, Bakersfield would need to cut 6.7 people out of their budget to make that target. Everybody would have to cut a few. Montgomery could actually hire 2.8 to get to that target.
But
And because our schools are all relatively small.
well, I was just gonna say just what that whole thing about getting to 5 adults, which is why we would all want some clarification on what exactly counts as an adult, because
Exactly.
For sure.
any decent economist, anybody who knows math can look at that and say, well, I could cut 6 very cheap adults. That's not actually making a huge impact on my budget at all.
Right, yeah.
Or those kids who have one-on-ones are shipped off to SOAR.
That would be another way to do it too. And that's
So,
adding more expenses too.
We're not suggesting that you should be budgeting to these numbers, but we're just kind of giving you.
But at least it's gonna be our
heads up.
champion when we're.
I would be
comparison
surprised
some
if
of the-
anybody has time to work on that problem this session, so if they do, I'll be surprised.
Do you have any comparison statewide where we fall compared to other districts for an average or for schools our size?
We don't
I
on
haven't
this.
seen that.
There are some principal to students, principal to teachers, and teachers to students that the state used to put out. I don't know that they put it out in the last
It's been a little
1 or
while.
2
They used to give
years.
us cohort, so it would be like compare you to like similarly sized schools.
Okay.
And you could kind of see how you compare in that range, but
So it's just about size, it's not, 20% are on IEPs and the other 10 are on 504. So it's
Right.
data, but it's really not useful in any way, shape, or form.
So it's exactly what we want you to tune into. So if you did happen to start hearing conversations like that, like if the conversation about 1 to 5, if that should go anywhere, it isn't about the decisions about programming. It's about getting to this number. And what we're just trying to say is we want to be transparent with you that if should that happen, this is what that would mean. Doesn't mean that that's what we're intending to do at all.
Thank you.
We're just saying we want you to understand what 1 to 5 means to our schools at this point. So we're not recommending those shifts. We want our shifts to be thoughtful. And we want to be looking at, like, through attrition, we've had this position. Is this a position that we still want? We want to look at our goals. We want to think about, what's best for our kids at this point as we move forward. But I don't think, we're not suggesting major sweeping reductions.
I've said this publicly before and I'll say it again. One of the things that I most appreciated with our last principal in Bakersfield is that, so for example, if like the kindergarten teacher said she wasn't returning for the next school year, the principal didn't say, well, we're gonna need to hire a new kindergarten. She would, look at the staff, look at the strengths of the community and, she would always hire, well, not always, but decide what the need is and then make a decision on where you're going to hire. And I just think that's incredibly valuable in the world that I work in. It's like, oh, that person left over. You've got to hire another one of those. Like there's really a lot of value in making that assessment of your entire team and your entire, faculty and staff. And that impacts this number.
And Emily, I think these numbers here are maybe pretty close to not useful.
Yeah.
And things like kindergarten, you're not going to be able to have a 0.8 kindergarten teacher. It's really maybe getting more useful when you start looking at interventionists or coaches or people that you can share across buildings.
Right.
Or paraprofessionals.
And so speaking of that and looking at Montgomery in particular, and I know that Sandy spoke with you and she's spoken with me about a very distinct need for a math interventionist, which we do not have. And when we look at this staffing, we have 10 fewer adults in the building than Bakersfield. And we're the only school that does not have a math interventionist. So again, I know we're
talking about that
trying to not pit. This is not about pitting one school against the other, and I'm circling back to the equity and equality kind of conversation. But it's an identified need for sure within our building.
Definitely. The principals went through the same exercise and they had some kind of next steps to this exercise. So there were 3 goals in Act 46. It was about looking at financial efficiency, looking at opportunity, and looking at excellence. Sorry, 3 E's. So one of the things that when we look at our overall spending per pupil, I think most of you at this point have seen the charts where they plot out the spending levels for all the schools throughout the state. We come in very low, near the lowest of the state, and certainly pretty low in comparison to the county as well. So I think that we're being really mindful about that, and that was feedback we got from the state board was, you guys are doing a great job with the efficiency part. Right now, we need to look at the equity and the excellence piece as well, and making sure that we have what we need to support all of our students. So Sandy has been very clear about that, and there's another school as well that could benefit from something like that. So we're looking at, instead of saying, we think Montgomery needs a full-time, is there a way for us to say, is there a partner school where we could look at, could we get some mutual benefit between these 2 schools for those positions? And the same for instructional coaches, because instructional coaching is pretty important, especially given the population of teacher turnover that we continue to have between our schools. So the principals have had the opportunity to look at the current reality and to look at what are some things we're already doing around efficiency and sharing resources. What are the things that we could potentially do? What are some other ways that we could share these resources with one another? And they're already doing some really creative things. But then their other piece was, what's a wish? What are some of your wishes for if you had some opportunity to build something into the budget, to look at a need you have in your building? What would that be? This is not like a race where we're going to do all of it at once. We've got to think about what are our priorities in this first step in this process.
And how do you identify need? So, when
That's
Mary
my
said,
question.
so we need a math interventionist. That is driven by SBAC scores or 5 kids on IEPs who are below standards, or how do you rationalize that?
So it's all of that. It's looking at your data in general. It's looking at your systems of supports in your building. So our principals are doing a lot of work around looking at the multiple layers in the multi-tiered systems of supports and looking at who do we have that can provide this type of intervention in our building. And there are some buildings, when we look at the system we have for supporting kids, that are missing pieces of the layer.
Okay.
But then it's also looking at the economy of scale. So if it was something where maybe there was an equitable need between Berkshire and Montgomery, and they were both, they both had no intervention. Looking at the scale of Berkshire, maybe Montgomery would get a portion of it, Berkshire might get a higher portion of it, given the how many kids they'd be trying to serve. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And I can't speak to how the other principals kind of manage in their respective buildings, but I see this unbelievable kind of efficiency of use around all the support staff, the teachers, and really, maximizing their presence and their kind of engagement with the student population, and it's as efficient as it could be. And so then I think, if given that really strong eye to efficiency of using every person really wisely, their time, their skills, their training, and you're still kind of seeing a gap that you can't kind of pull it out of nowhere, because everyone's kind of maxed out in their capacity.
Just as far as the budget breaks out by what type of adult in each school, who makes that decision? Like, who gets to pick how many, coaches versus licensed teachers versus, how does that breakout work? Is that a by school principal decision on
So
what?
your principals right now have worked with Morgan on what their current budget proposal is, so that they have looked at the needs within their buildings. And they've done some staff analysis, and you're going to get to take a little bit of a look at that. We're still in the early stages of this. Ultimately, you're going to get the opportunity to decide, is this budget acceptable? Right. If it's not, we're not really I'm not wanting us to say we want the board to say cut this person from this school and this person from this school. We want you to say, we need you to bring this down by X percentage, and then let the administrators that are working through this go back to the drawing board and say, what do we need? What can we do without? So I think that if we were doing that at the board level, it would be relatively arbitrary, because you don't have that level of data to do that analysis.
So I don't ever want to have to do that at the board table.
It's not fun, but you get through it.
Right.
Good.
Anything else? You gonna do budget?
Yep.
For your next act.
Ready for me?
Yeah, still ready for you.
So my first 2 items on my report are both informational. I can answer questions on them if you got them. While you're thinking about questions or deciding you have none, I'm going to send around.
Morgan, I have a quick high school tuition question. Can you remind me why we delineate between Stansted and St. Johnsbury? We pay those at the first part of the school year, but the other private schools we do not pay those until almost the end of the semester.
So if we have a kid that goes to Stansted, we get a bill for a kid from Stansted, and then we pay that.
Okay.
And then they
I like to get
show up in Memorial Union
Right.
after they send their first semester tuition bills back. We might get a tuition bill for the second semester for basically 3/4 of the year. We've already paid Stansted. We're sort of obligated to pay Memorial because it's an in-state school.
No, right,
Yeah.
of course, but we paid
St.
the
J is
stands.
different because St. J, Burton, Linden Institute, and the other one are the sort of the 4 Vermont academies that sort of quasi-operate as public schools, that they get their own
Right.
tuition rates. And so we've got the ability to get tuition money back from them if we pay for semester 1 and then the kid drops out and goes to another school after a few weeks.
Right, but I thought that we pay, but I get that, and that, because we're obligated if they drop out of the private school and go to public school to then also pay that. But I thought we sent in payments, I thought I saw the Stansted payments come through on the vouchers. So maybe I was mistaken, because I was wondering, why are we lumping it in with St. Johnsbury and LI and the schools, that we have that cushion should those students?
I will look into that. Generally, we don't send.
I'd have to look back, maybe I may not be accurate. I thought I saw Stansted go out, some vouchers go out for Stansted, and it surprised me that we were paying them this early in the semester just for that very reason.
I saw them also.
For Stansted?
Yes,
Okay.
and is that a fact that we pay them and then students drop out and go elsewhere and we don't get the money back? Has that happened?
It can be. Currently, there are enough kids at Stansted that if one dropped out, I would just short their second semester bill.
Which we've done.
Which we've done. It's more of a concern if we have a kid we have a single kid at a private school and we pay them early.
Has that happened?
We have had kids at Stansted show up in public schools before, but we've had enough room to do that.
Is your question, has it happened
Yeah.
in another private school where we haven't been able to get it back?
Yeah, I guess, because that's disturbing that we would just let that money go away. This is all new to me because we don't ever have students going elsewhere besides our own public schools. Montgomery's used to it, but in Berkshire, we're not used to this at all. So that's very disturbing that we would be losing tuition money.
So what Mary's saying is that we wait, normally if our processes are going well, we wait until usually beginning of December to send the first semester bill payments out, because by then we're pretty sure they're not going to show up in a public school, and then we wait until April, May timeframe.
Because I'm pretty sure I saw 2 at least, maybe 3.
And those were just the Stansted,
Yes.
not our other private schools, which, so it somehow, it may have slipped through, but, our customary practice is exactly like Morgan said. You wait till almost the semester is over, and you've thus ensured that, that child isn't dropping out of the semester we're in. So, okay.
Thanks for bringing that up.
So in front of you, you have version 1 of the detail of your FY21 budget. I have not given you the whole budget. I think I mentioned this in the email that I sent out. I'm really focusing just on the lines that have people that you control, so your employees, and I've tried to capture all the CAT and autism workers as well. There's a lot to go through on 30 pages. I can do it a number of different ways. We can kind of go line by line. I can work with the principals just to kind of pull out the highlights of what's changing. I can skip around and point to a few places where I know things are changing and let you guys take this home and look at it at your leisure. However you want to do it.
It's your pleasure, folks.
I always appreciate when you tell us anything that's changing from the year before. That's helpful.
Okay. So for this, you'll see there's an FY20 FTE column and then an FY21 FTE column. And this is where you can see where the principals are making changes budget to budget. There are a few exceptions to that this year. One is that when we got the FY20 budget for Sheldon, we only got dollar amounts, so I didn't have any FTEs to attach to that. So it is going to look like Christie on page 28 is adding 54 people to her budget.
Go Christie.
Yes, good job. That's efficient.
If you look on, not too many places where this shows up, but if you look at the bottom of page 9, this is in Berkshire, and it's, the last line is contracted professional services. In the past, we've not collected an FTE for those people that you're purchasing from NCSS or other outside agencies. I'm starting to do that this year, so you'll see that line. It looks like it's up 4 people from the year before. It's not, I go back, it might actually be down 1 from the year before, from the budget we had the year before. So there are a few anomalies there. In terms of actual people in Bakersfield, there's no changes from what you have in the building right now. The budget to budget should drop a little bit because we had a TBH in your FY20 budget that wasn't filled, and your guidance counselor, which is top of page 3, we'd actually budgeted full-time and filled that only 4 days a week. So there's a little bit of a drop there.
And Morgan, does this budget account for a math interventionist in Montgomery, that added person?
This is not yet.
And what about the tech, the halftime tech between Bakersfield and Montgomery?
It does. So Bakersfield had that in their budget last year. Montgomery didn't. So you'll see that as an increase in Montgomery's budget.
Okay.
And it's a guess in terms of salary right now because we haven't filled it yet. But if you look at, for Bakersfield.
Are these broken out by school, Morgan?
They are.
And how do you know?
So the description will have it, but it gets kind of truncated because it's the last thing on there.
Okay, got it. I see bake.
So in Bakersfield, the tech person is in the middle of page 4.5. They were budgeted last year. In Montgomery, that is going to show up on the very bottom of page 17. The year prior, you just had a stipend in there that was given to a teacher to try to fix devices when they broke.
Yeah.
One other point that I want to make before I forget is that if you skip down to the last page, the difference, and this is only looking at the difference budget to budget on these lines, the difference is up just over $100,000. Increase to healthcare accounts for $157,000 of that. So if healthcare had stayed level, this would actually be a slight decrease. We supposedly will know on the 12th of this month what the 2 sides in the healthcare negotiations have proposed. And by December 1st, we will know which plan the arbiter has chosen. So possibly, I don't remember when your December meeting falls, but hopefully in your December look at the budget, if not certainly your January look, we will have a more accurate picture of healthcare. We won't in terms of salaries because you're negotiating with your teachers, you're negotiating with your parents, and you're negotiating with most of your administrators. So right now, I've made some assumptions on increases and built those in. I may be tweaking those based on where the healthcare discussion goes. I don't think we're gonna have any real read from negotiations about where we're going before we need to finalize a budget.
Can I ask a specific line item question? Sheldon has, on page 27, a $75,000 reduction in special education. Where does that come from?
So my guess is that it has to do with how Northwest was budgeting whether paraeducators were gonna be special ed or regular ed. And that split may have changed. I don't think, and Christy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there were any changes to the number of paras. So I'm thinking it's the split between special ed and regular ed.
So that reasoning also speaks to the top line of that, the salaries / paraeducators, it's a difference of 54.
Yeah.
That's the same
Yeah.
logic, okay.
The other thing I don't know is how Northwest would budget for their HRAs. And cash in lieu, they may have thrown those into a salary line, whereas we are pulling them out in health insurance.
So the special educators are not in this budget. This
Special
is-
ed paras.
Right. I just want to make sure you understood the difference. So
And
those are
before-
FNESU employees.
Right,
So those are in the SU budget.
correct. Yeah, I just, to read it. And I'm sorry if you already explained this with the tuition in the high schools. So every town pays for each high school student regardless of where they go? Like pays something to that
The district
school?
will pay for every high school student who's going to a public high school in Vermont, really a public high school anywhere, one of the 4 academies, or a private school that now this board has deemed meets educational quality standards.
So we're paying regardless if it's public versus
Correct.
private?
But if
If
it's
it's a
private,
private-
we're only paying the state average tuition rate and the
Okay.
parents are responsible.
And is that in here?
That's not in here yet. That'll be in your next budget. We're still missing a few big tuition bills. So I didn't want to put in what we knew and make you think that we were going to save a bunch of money.
And just to back up real quick on the math interventionist, did you say then that's not really considered a need at this point, more like a wish list item?
We haven't
Or it's not
added,
really,
we haven't done that yet.
okay,
So this was just when the principals met with Morgan. We haven't done anything from what the principals came up with when they met with one another. They're gonna get another opportunity to go back to that. I don't remember the day, but whatever day you're coming to me for leadership.
okay.
And I think, yeah, certainly at the board level, but I also think internally, we kind of need to get a bead on the tuition kids, special ed costs and what that assessment is going to look like before we're going to feel comfortable saying, we think you should be adding an interventionist here in case if the tuition kids, the budget's up 10%. Because then the discussion may be, well, we're going to need to pull back here. or there.
Is there a spot where it tells us if the number of adults, because this is basically just the people, are the number, just tell you specifically like where they're changing in each building based on what the principals have suggested? Or like a call out to that to say like, they
What do you
plan on,
mean?
like they
Next
plan
year
on
we're gonna have
reducing
two
this
second
or
graders,
adding this,
yeah.
right? Like is there a place that actually just calls out like a change? I mean, it's hard to tell
Not
really.
here.
Do you have anything specifically that you changed in that budget from Sheldon?
I didn't change any numbers.
No actual.
So this is just like, if we just rolled over what so this isn't at all really we haven't done that conversation about like what would next year look like. This is just this year, everyone in here, what would next year
Again,
look like?
next year.
Yes.
It's pretty much just rolled over.
I thought you were saying you had already had the principal discussion.
We have,
I thought
but
this
that
was a
hasn't made it
reflection
in
of that.
here yet because like what Morgan said,
Right.
we don't have enough information to know if we're gonna be in a place where we can
do
talk
it.
about wishes
Right.
and talk about what do we want in terms of equity. You need to get closer to what that bottom line is with some of those other bigger numbers.
First.
And then we'll come back and look at it and if you're comfortable with where we're at, there'll be things that we will talk about in order for us to get closer to that equity and excellence. We would like to add the following. Here's our prioritized kind of list
Right.
of what we would like to add into this.
This is first pass. and I know can be very overwhelming as a new board member.
I mean, I have a $20 million budget, but there's a lot less line items.
But I think that it's important to know that it is the first time, and there will be a whole lot more conversations here and outside of this room. But the other thing I was going to say is that as we continue down this line, we then will get to a point where Morgan's going to say, this budget today is what and equals this impact on the taxpayers. Yeah, to the taxpayers. Right. And so then that also colors our discussions as to, as a previous member of the Bakersfield board, many times we were blessed to have excess left. And so it's like, okay, what shall we do with this? Like, and we could put it here, we could put it there, or we could throw it into the next budget so that it keeps the rate down. So there's a whole lot more beyond this, and I feel like this can numb your brain and make you go cross-eyed. Sorry, Morgan.
That's what he does every day.
I know. This is what makes you get up every day, right?
Exactly.
Well, this is also a lot bigger than it is when you, any other time we've sat here.
Mm-hmm.
Right. There's a lot more pages.
And I will start also bringing, once we have all your line items in there, we bring you what I'm proposing that we present to the voters, which is a much more bigger picture.
Right.
We're not going to go into each individual benefit line.
Right. To the voters, will they get each individual school and the change? It's the school level, because they're going to vote on the full district budget, correct?
That's right.
So will they see the change at each school level?
I mean, I will come up with a suggestion on a presentation, and you guys can tell me to change it if you want.
Yeah.
And we can put this in front of your voters.
Just on this first pass of this, there's some big discrepancies by schools. So I'm just curious if we're going to break that down for voters.
And if we don't, are we going to get a big kickback?
No.
We have? But is it our choice ultimately, which
how we present it? Yeah, and it's like being a mom. It's like being a parent of all these community members, and you want to give them the information that they can digest and that is accessible to them.
Just going to be hard to explain, but I think you have to.
Yeah.
Especially this being the first year, I just think making sure we're very honest with the taxpayers in each town is an important part of this.
I agree with you, and I think that transparency is incredibly important, and at the same time it has to be in a way that they can understand, because sometimes too much information you can get too much into the weeds, and you can make some pretty big assumptions about what certain things mean.
Absolutely.
So part of it might be in the narrative, in the description.
That's the part that worries. That's the piece right there that worries me the most. I don't like sitting at a table discussing the NMV budget with a community member who says, well, Berkshire's got and Sheldon ought to get. I don't want to be in that position, right? Because it's not where we're trying to get this board, the direction that this board is going in. It's not the direction that we want our community to go in. So that's the piece that is I want to be transparent, but I don't want to be there.
Yeah.
So you don't want it to feed that fair is equal conversation either, because I think there's stuff that we're deliberately bringing to you. We brought a tough conversation to you today for us to just be really thinking deeply about the work that we're doing. And I think that they're going to be missing all of those pieces. They're going to be missing those deep, rich conversations that these principals are having with one another, and individually when they're meeting with Morgan, and individually when they're meeting with me. The data that we're looking at, the unique needs, they're going to miss all of that. And you're not likely to get them to come sit face to face with you at your information meeting. So that's the tricky part, is we have to be really thoughtful about transparency and clarity and simplicity in a way that they can get what they're looking for without getting too far down the weeds.
And I think for a lot of people who were against some of these mergers, the one thing they are gonna be looking for is the cost savings, because that was what was thrown in their face, this is gonna save you money, this is gonna save you money. So I just, I just worry we're gonna get some big backlash.
I think, and in Sheldon, I think they knew because we were late to the merger party, that they recognized and knew, because it was put out there that we missed that financial incentive deadline, if you will. They knew that. I think at this point, people are, what is my tax rate? What is my tax rate? What is my tax rate? That's really what they're gonna wanna know. And obviously, we'll get there when we get there and can talk about it and how do we craft a very careful message and a message that's really understandable. Because our population, at least that's gonna go and sit through a presentation primarily at town meeting, is gonna need black and white. And short and sweet.
I hope that we all can help with that. The piece of this is not just about saving money on your taxes. I think we have to also share the message that we're already near the bottom of what other schools are spending. So what are our goals and priorities for our kids? Is that our sole focus? I hope as the leader of this organization, that's not our whole sole focus. Not that I don't want us to be efficient and really be looking at maximizing the resources that we have, but I sure want us to be looking at what are we doing for our kids, because we've been so conservative and we've been so low spending that we are missing some of the opportunities that some of the other schools throughout the state are offering to their kids. And there is, we have to look at it through the lens of what's the economy of scale for us compared to them. But in terms of the size of our organization, we're not super small anymore in our SU. It might be that some of our schools are, in that 120 to 200 range, but in terms of our overall organization, we're responsible for educating almost 2,000 children in these 10 schools. So I really hope that we can shift some of that focus away from those promised cost savings, because I think that was hammered to death when this first began. We missed out on a lot of those incentives that would have given some of that cost savings. So I hope we can shift the lens to the excellence and equity conversation.
Right, because those 3 E's, it didn't say savings, it said efficiency, equity, and excellence. But then the narrative got pulled into that whole other conversation.
I think we can do it here, the way you craft the message. I mean, we had a struggle even when we had to propose the bond. To say, people didn't, they're like, well, I don't want to see my taxes go up. But when you present the information to say, this is what you're getting, this is what you're paying, this is what you're getting, and this is how you're better off. I mean, it passed with flying colors. So I think we have ears for those types of messages here in Sheldon, and it'll be all right.
So the other thing this budget doesn't have yet is a facilities manager.
Right.
If you want to kind of take the lead on that.
Yeah, so we had, thank you, forgot to put that on my agenda.
Did you have something you wanted to say, Erin?
It's okay. Was that about the budget part before we go to this?
Nope, go ahead.
So we had talked at the SU level about facilities director, and it wasn't something that the SU board wanted to do at the SU level. I heard from all of you that there was interest in bringing that back to this district level and looking at that as a service that could provide some efficiencies within our buildings over time and create some space for our principals to be doing more instructional leadership and less toilet and valve and roofing work. So I would like you to have that conversation. You don't have to make a motion, but point us in the direction as board members. Are you ready to say to us, put that position in this budget?
So it would be an NMV position.
Yes.
Do you have any idea of the cost of something like that? That's what I'm wondering. I have no idea what the salary would look like for that.
I've actually seen some chatter on one of the groups online around what people pay, and it's probably going to be 50 to 80. Those are the numbers that I'm seeing people put out.
That's actually less than what I was thinking.
Oh, really?
So I say put it in. I'm going to make that motion.
What I'll do, I don't need a motion, but if you guys all want to see it in your next draft of the budget, it'll be in there.
And remember, you're going to approve that budget in the end. So if it gets on the chopping block at the end, it gets on the chopping block. But are you comfortable with us moving forward, putting it in? I think I know how you feel about this.
Yeah, I mean, my preference was someone at the FNESU level, but I was not in the majority in that desire. So, you know, I'm comfortable looking at what it looks like embedded in just the NMV budget.
Would they be I guess I don't understand.
Yeah, I don't-
Would they be would they be a central office employee?
No,
No.
that was what we floated.
Right.
Well,
So
they
would
might be
they
a central office employee, but they wouldn't be an SU.
I just was
They're
thinking,
only
who
gonna
will
be-
manage this person? Will you take that role?
We both
You
will.
both share.
He'll do a lot of the work. Did we just both point at each other?
Yeah.
Just sometimes. So it would be led through our office,
Yeah.
but the payment for it would
Out
be
of
shared
this.
at
Absolutely.
NMV.
I was thinking more leadership, because I think the role could be very valuable depending upon how it's
Yeah.
managed.
So the idea that was proposed at the SU meeting was that we hire a person to manage both sides of the house, right? The NMV and the Enosburg-Richford side. And the Enosburg-Richford folks had discussed it before that meeting at their own board meeting, and we're not particularly, they like got a good thing going, they don't need our help. So, I shared this with Mary before, like, I'm kind of hell-bent on this position. I just think the loop I'm stuck in is there's not a building principal sitting here or at a table I've ever sat at who thought, I want to become a principal because I want to flush toilets and fix broken roofs. Like, you know, that's not why they got here. And so I think
And they're not,
we're wasting the resource that they bring to the table on stuff that needs to be done, but that could be done by someone who has that skill set. And I really do think the other piece of it for me is that if you bring a person into this role who has the knowledge base, they can say, no, that is stupid. Like, no, the
You're gonna
valve
save
is
money.
dumb, you know,
Yeah,
like,
right.
and they can say, no, you're getting
Yeah.
scammed, or no, do that, and that's gonna save. So I really believe that the salary that, like, let's say it's $100,000 we end up paying this person. I think we will make that money back in efficiencies very quickly, you know, even if it's just in time saving with these principals. So, I mean, this is my soapbox. I will get off from it, but I'm totally behind it.
I fully agree with it. My mind just keeps going to what is the salary? Are we talking 60? Are we talking 100? Are
Yeah.
we talking 80? Because
Right.
that's all over the board for me.
Right.
And then what are we looking for in terms of what experience do you have? What credentials? What licensures? What I would like
So
to know.
we're going to work with Vermont School Boards Association.
Okay.
Right now they have a facilities director project going on where they're training facilities directors. They're partnering with BISBIT, Vermont School Boards Insurance Trust. And I've talked with Jeff Francis, and he would help us to design a job description.
Okay.
So he's willing to work through this
But
with
it's
us.
fresh ground.
Yeah.
So,
we don't have all the answers we want you to say to us, move with the concept. We can play with the numbers as we look at, like, we can ask for that information from the VSBA. We probably have it, don't we?
I now have it, and it ranges from 54,000 to 123,000.
well, that's a narrow range.
It depends on what school district you're
Yeah, where you're
in.
located.
Depends
Yeah,
on-
exactly.
Yeah.
How many
And
buildings
their
are
background and what
managing?
they bring to the table.
Right.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
gonna say what certifications they have, because I know I've worked with a facilities director who had, you know, he was a master plumber, he
Right.
had some experience doing electrical work, and so.
And someone like that can actually go in and do a
He
lot of
actually
it
did
sometimes
some
and not
things.
having to sub
Right.
it out. So that's
Right.
savings in itself too, even if you're
Right.
paying a higher salary.
Right.
Someone who has, a true GC.
So really, I think it sounds like we're all ready to at least continue to move forward with a concept. If we get to a position where we're like, wow, suddenly we need to hire other, you know, faculty members, then we can back away from this. But I think we're all, so you don't need a motion, but I see a lot of heads nodding, so.
Yeah.
Any other questions on the budget? That was a little bit of a sidebar there. And you can certainly ask me questions offline too. I'm happy to do that. Sheldon Elementary Envelope Project. The update is on Monday, we closed the pre-qualification process in terms of people submitting their credentials. We had 11 firms submit to be considered for pre-qualification.
11?
Yep.
Seems like a
lot.
Yeah, that's like a surprisingly high number.
It's a surprisingly high number. The architect firm said they were surprised that it was that many, and they think it's because we're starting earlier than everyone else.
Well, good.
There's also a few very large projects, I think Burlington's one of them, that people were thinking were going to start this summer and are now pushed off a year. So a lot of these places may have some openings on their dance card for this summer that they didn't in the past.
I know I asked this question before, but I can't remember. What is the size of this project? Are we a little project?
Yes.
We're little? Yeah.
In comparison.
Yeah.
1.7.
Yep.
Yeah, that's kind of
It's a baby.
Yeah, and so like I had a roofing project that my roofing contractor was like, yeah, see you next summer. Like I got bigger fish to fry. Like I just don't want to end up in that position.
So the way the process will work is that at your December meeting, this board will, the recommendation, I hope, of the construction subcommittee will pre-qualify a subset of these 11 people. They will be allowed to bid. We will bid in late winter, early spring. We will hopefully get bids back from half of them. And then you will be obligated to take the low bid at that point. So the pre-qualification process is important in that we want to weed out anybody that we can't work with. There are a lot of familiar names on the list, so I think we will have a pretty solid list to go to bid, even if we do end up latering some of them. And then generally what they do is they'll submit their bid. It's 30 days. If there's anything out of whack, we'll take the low bidder and we'll say, you know, are you sure you can do it for this? We'll negotiate on adds or deducts. So if the project starts to look really expensive before we go to bid, we might say, oh, this is the base project, but tell us what it would cost if we wanted to add this kind of door, wanted to add this kind of floor to the gym. And then you as a board get to pick which of those you want to take or which things you want to knock out. So Mary, Emily, Christy, and I, or 4/5 of the subcommittee, will meet after this meeting, and we'll kind of divvy up the work on doing some reference checking on these 11. And then on your December whatever meeting, we'll bring back a list and can answer any questions then, but we'll want to leave that meeting with a list of who you want to pre-qualify.
Cool.
Before we go to principals, could I say something?
Sure.
I have one other.
Oh, go for it.
Oh, sorry.
I don't need to go into great detail on this, but Berkshire, Bakersfield, and Montgomery had, for their copiers, have been using SimQuest, who has a state contract. So it's pre-bid, and we've just been working with them because we have a good relationship with them. Sheldon has been using an outfit called Specialized Purchasing Consultants, which gathers a bunch of bids together and then goes and bids them out and gets bids from multiple copier companies, and then we'll kind of manage that for you. We need to do some work at least in Sheldon this year around some contracts coming up. I'm assuming based on the tenor of this board in the past that you would want me to include the entire district on that. It would be committing us to this group. My suspicion is that we'll save money.
Committing us to the Sheldon group?
To the group that bids out Sheldon.
Yeah, okay.
I tried to get them to do it just for our SU office so I could kind of compare and see how they came in, and because we only have 2 machines and they are both currently under lease, they didn't want to damage any relationships with our current company by poaching those 2. Because they'll have contracts with probably 5 or 6 different providers, and then we can choose within that which company we want to go with. So I don't need a motion, but if you guys want to redirect me and say, no, we definitely don't want to change that, I definitely won't change that. Otherwise, I'm gonna assume that we'll move forward with this group. They will at least initially do kind of a fleet inventory and then come up with an idea that they think they're gonna save money or not.
Do we own all the copiers in all the schools, or any of them leased? Or
They're
all of
mostly
them
leased.
Yeah.
Okay.
We probably still own a few in the old Franklin Northeast schools, because we tended to do that, and they're probably all leaky toner.
Yep.
Yeah. The one in our office may be the last one we bought
Are upstairs.
downstairs.
Oh yeah, we just leased upstairs.
So you want a motion?
I just want some guidance, or I want you to redirect me if you don't want me to do that. Or if you're just totally not interested, we can move on to the principal's report.
Anybody? So, but I got a little bit lost, Morgan, sorry. Potentially, everybody who has SimQuest is gonna end up in this new conglomeration, potentially, is that what you're saying? Maybe?
Yes, but SimQuest is a company that actually puts the machines out there. The outfit that Sheldon uses basically says, if you agree to sign up with us, we're gonna go and bid it out as part of this big group.
Yeah.
And as part of that big group, we can still choose SimQuest.
Yeah.
That's one of the people who bids.
Yeah, okay.
So it's not necessarily changing the companies, it's changing how we're interacting with them.
Purchasing power.
Okay, that sounds fine to me.
Just save
Please
money.
move forward.
That's all I got.
Okay.
So before we get started on the principal's reports, we, as a result of our training with the VSBA and conversations I've had with the board chairs, I've asked principals to approach their principal's reports differently. So if it's informational, it's going to be in your board packet. We're going to assume that everybody reads their board packets before the meeting. So when each principal goes up, if they have an action item, they're going to tell you that they have an action item. If they don't, they're going to say everything I have is informational. It's in the report. Does anybody have any questions? So I don't want you to think they're purposefully not saying anything. We're trying to be thoughtful about time because there's so many administrators. What we will do though is each time we're in a building, we'll give the principal of that building some airtime like we did with Christy tonight. And you'll have that chunk of meetings in the middle of the year, coming up when it's snowy in Enosburg, and we've got some rotation there too. So you'll have some airtime with each of those principals on a regular basis.
Okay.
But these are coming, they're coming sooner? I saw that she was requesting information sooner so that.
Yes.
Because to get it on a Monday and be prepared for a Wednesday, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Especially when there's a large amount
So
to read.
this week, our intention was to get your packet out last Friday, but the weather didn't cooperate with us. We didn't have any power, so we're gonna try to get it out before the weekend. So we've backed everything way back, so your principals are having to do their board reports. We're having to do our board reports like a week earlier than before, because what I'm trying to do now is meet with the board chairs or have a conversation with the board chairs in advance of the meetings, and I'm reviewing all of the principals' reports before to condense, so we'll try to get it to you even earlier.
Okay. Christy, anything you want us to move on?
It's all information.
Okay. Rhoda?
Mine's all informational too. I just wanted to quickly say, because one of mine had a sentence that wasn't finished. It said, we'll be interviewing these two candidates on. So, we interviewed them. What day was that? It was this week. Monday. It was Monday this week.
Okay.
So, just wanted to let you know that.
Okay. Lenny?
Hi.
Yes.
All informational,
No action.
no actions.
Okay. Anything on behalf of Sandy that you're aware of, Lynn?
It was all informational.
All informational. Okay, considering it's 9:06, I'm thankful that it was all informational. And like, sorry, Lynn, are you folks as board members okay with that? Coming from getting a report from the principal, so you can read it in advance? And
I think it's great.
yeah, okay. We do pack a lot into these once a month meetings, and I know they go long, so I appreciate the reports and us moving in this direction, so.
You have board business.
Oh, yes, I have some board business. First, any future agenda items that anybody wants to add for our next meeting, which is December 4th in Bakersfield? Okay, I'll take that as a no. And then the next item was our nursing staffing level. And I think Lynn wants to talk about the data that you sent along in the report, I'm assuming.
So Rachel made a request at the last meeting for the board to consider budgeting for an increase in nursing levels for both Berkshire and for Montgomery. She shared some data, some comparison data from other schools throughout the state. So I did a little digging myself because I was trying to get a sense of where Rachel's at now, because I feel like I've been pretty aware of what the nursing levels have been in at least one of those schools. Would you agree?
More than anyone.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to, it isn't data that I can share out with the board because the ends are so small, like the number of students in each of those categories would be identifiable. But I just asked to get a sense of what's the current reality in each of those schools. So I did a little digging after the last meeting, and I pulled out the education quality standards, and this is kind of what guides leaders in terms of what's set by the state board in terms of our expectations. So there is a statement in there about school nursing. It says each school shall engage the services of a person licensed as a school nurse or associate school nurse. There shall be no more than 500 students per school nurse. Schools with 500 students shall employ, schools with fewer than 500 students shall employ a nurse on a pro rata basis. I also pulled information around delegating nursing interventions, and there was information I was waiting for that didn't actually come until I was on my way here tonight. So in terms of delegation, there's still the same delegation authority as Rachel has always had in terms of being able to train and sign off on the competency of the people who are there when she is not within those buildings. What I don't have is change over time, Rachel, in terms of data. So I know your perception was that it is feeling like there's more, but I don't have is data that indicates that there's a greater need than what there has historically been in those buildings.
I think there's not a higher higher ratio, but I think the current, some of the single students are more challenging than some of the single students in the past. Does that make sense? Higher acuity, maybe. And there's more nursing involvement with, which I love, with every aspect of their care. That's more time consuming. And also speaking to the delegation piece, because you brought that up, it's also, I'm delegating to people you said that I feel comfortable delegating to, but I don't feel like I have a choice about who I delegate to, because there's just a select few, or that I have enough time to be able to, for them to fully comprehend exactly what they're doing when they're doing it when I'm not there. Does that make sense?
It does, and I'm curious though how that's shifted over time. That's what I'm trying to make sense of.
Personnel has shifted over time. I think the comfort level of people that I used to work with is different than the comfort level of some people that I work with now. And I think that's been an experience in other schools that, over time when personnel has changed, it makes a huge difference who you're delegating to. If they're not comfortable doing something that's critical to a student's care, you can see how much my job would change and the safety of that.
So when that's happening, are you saying that you're not being given any other choices for staff members that could?
I think just yeah, I don't think it's anyone's fault necessarily. I think it's just, the people that I'm able to delegate to are the ones that are there. That's like, as basic as I can put it. I don't know, like, who else I could delegate to. What other choice do I have?
I mean, other staff within the building.
Right.
But I mean, you can't interrupt a teacher, right? I'm sorry to interrupt.
No.
But like, you know what I mean? Like, there's few people who work in the front office probably that are actually able to do that.
Right.
But you have people
Well,
in
and
some
my-
other roles in the building who potentially could do some of those things.
Right.
My question is more, I guess, just around the whole model, like not so much of what's changed, but like being in a rural setting and if there was an emergency. I mean, I don't know what the timing is for like a first responder, but like if something happened that was pretty critical and Rachel is not there, is there somebody that has, and again, I don't know what the expectation is, but someone who has like EMT training, because it takes 15 minutes to respond to Berkshire, Montgomery. That's sort of my like wanting to understand of like, what do we expect out of this position, and is it truly okay to be vacant half the time?
I guess I'm in the same boat, I guess. I feel like kids today have a lot more food allergies, a lot more medications doled out all day. And like, I know my mom as a secretary was responsible for that. And even way back when, she used to say it gave her so much anxiety. She's not a licensed nurse. And things are so much more complicated now than they were then.
I think the way pediatrician practices have shifted too in a certain time period affects everything that I do and how I manage it at school versus how it used to be dealt with too. And
Well, and just as an example, I mean, and this happened long ago, but my son had a fever-induced seizure. I had no idea what was happening. Like, if that happened in school to a preschooler and you weren't there, does somebody else know what's happening? And I mean, it really wasn't life or death. I later found out, but like just an example
Scary,
of,
nevertheless.
yeah, it's terrifying and it could go on for many minutes. And, so that sort of thing, like, the people left in your absence, are they prepared for those sorts of situations? Because again, I don't know the day-to-day. I mean, I know there was parents that came with you and there's specifics that we can't get into because of privacy of that day-to-day stuff, but I'm also thinking big picture, just an emergency situation. So yeah, who is left in place and how prepared are they?
And I was everything that I see and listen to during in-service or at these board meetings, I try to relate to my practice as much as possible, and I'm hearing the basic needs of kids that aren't being met when they come into the building, and that is what I consider a huge part of my job that I'm not able to do as much as I would like to do. There's that student population, or that piece of a whole student that's not being met in some regards that I could help meet or have the opportunity to meet had I been in the building full-time or more often. And I have a lot of things that I would love to do, and I'm sure everyone does. And I'm not saying that I don't get to do some of those things still. I just if we're talking about basic needs being met before students can learn, I think that's a huge part of what school nursing is, and that's maybe not seen as what our roles are. It's not all Band-Aids and Tylenol. Or diagnoses on a paper. It's hard. It's really hard to show how busy I am through, just diagnoses too. My door is a revolving door a lot of days, and a lot of it is because of those basic needs. A lot of it is psychosomatic, but it's important all the same.
So that's where I was getting at the whole dichotomy between expecting education to pay for things that are human service needs, And, you know, originally when Rachel came to us, I thought, well, you know, it's worked okay and the designees have been able to do their jobs, and certainly they would not be put in a situation where they're being asked to do something that they can't do. But I'm also thinking about the degree to which students are really needy, and it may not all be physical, and the demands on the time of that employee who's supposed to be doing a different job. We hired that employee to do a different job, and they have to fill in essentially for Rachel when she's not there 50% of the time. I know way back as a parent of a kid who had a food allergy, there were no rules, there were no laws even at that point in time. And it was a little scary to know that there was not a medical professional in the building. So I'm leaning more towards thinking that this is something that we need to start doing to address kids' needs that are not just because they have diabetes or not just because they have a food allergy, but they have all these other things happening in their lives that are making them unhealthy.
Well, since it makes me think about, like, what else could we be tapping into? I mean, you have all that teaching resources around, okay, so you have that allergy or you have that anxiety. What could I be doing as a health personnel that has that teaching background to, like, do small groups and do some of that sort of intervention piece that we don't ever have time to do as educators, or like guidance counselors are just like already overbooked. I mean, I work in a very small school and we just hired a full-time nurse, and just the idea as a classroom teacher to not have to worry about what day, oh, what day is the nurse here? No, go this way or go that way. They're there. It's like that peace of mind, but we haven't even started tapping into the idea of like what else they could offer, because it's still very new to us. I think it's important, like we keep talking about like the facilities manager and that like taking that piece off of the principals. I think this is just one more opportunity for us to like be able to look at another resource in our buildings that could give us more than just, I don't want to undermine you by saying Band-Aids and
Right.
and a ice pack, because I know it's more than that, but I think there's a lot more we can dig by and use
I
by
think
increasing the position.
Sorry, but I think a case in point is I don't know about Enosburg High School, but Richford High School, the nurse constantly has lunch groups. And they could be students who perhaps, and I'm speculating, might have anxiety and can't eat in a group setting. So they have to be in a small group setting, or they're not going to eat healthy, or they don't know how to eat healthy. And she's teaching them those things through a social interaction. And I think what we were saying earlier, that's what our kids need. They need reinforcing activities like this. I mean, I don't think it's an unwise use of money to have a health educator who also knows first aid and emergency procedures to work with kids all day long.
So the health educator piece is a little, like, that makes sense. We don't have what we probably should in terms of health education in our schools, and I think that that's a big hole that we would require a license for. Like, if there's a way to couple that nursing piece with some of the education that goes along.
Yeah, I guess I was
It's a
talking.
different endorsements, a
Right.
different degree.
Right, but I guess I was talking more on an informal basis, like small groups,
Yeah, I have done
like
that
Erin
in the
was saying.
Yeah.
So in the past, I've been, what is acceptable to do is be a guest speaker in a classroom, and I've done and put together some lessons that were, I offered them to teachers would invite me and done that.
And they'd stay with you.
And the licensed teachers in the room.
But what about small groups? You're allowed to be
I hope so.
alone with kids in small groups and doing like a lunch thing, or if you had time. Right now, I'm assuming your lunch time is spent commuting between the two schools on certain days.
On certain days, it
Yeah.
is.
Can I ask a question about liability? Where does the liability fall if the nurse is out of the building?
On me?
Yeah, on the
Something,
nurse.
is it on the supervisory union, the district, the school?
There's plenty of liability that would go
Everywhere.
around.
Yeah.
Rachel's right, like her license is, she's responsible for the delegation piece. So every time if there's a child that has a seizure disorder, for example, she has to go through the training with whoever the delegates are. Like she may have 2 or 3 people, so it's scaffolded in case one of those is also absent. And she has to go through the training protocol with each of them and sign off that she's seen them do it and that they understand how to respond in the event of emergency. And she has to do that for allergies, she has to do that for diabetes, she has to just to go through that and track all of the trainings she's done. So there is the liability, like if she has not trained and delegated, there is a liability that goes to her. It's also us. So my job was to give you background information, which I have in terms of the EQS. So there's another piece of this I just want you to keep in mind. So the recommendation is 500 or prorated if you're a school that's smaller than that. At the same time, we have the annual snapshot, and this came up at the superintendent meeting recently about when they're looking at the efficiency accountability, they're also going to be looking at not serving, like not offering enough, but offering more than what is recommended as well. So you have a right to make the decision and give us the direction you want to go in. I just want you to be mindful that that'll be a part of it too. If we're overstaffed, you're also going to see that on your report card as well.
I can speak to the 1 to 500 ratio through our school nurse health liaison. They consider 1 to 500 healthy students, the ratio. And so anyone with a diagnosis, the ratio changes, like maybe one diagnosis is equal to 20 healthy students.
Is that part of the school health services profile, Rachel? Like when they start looking at,
I don't, she,
or the chronic health
referenced-
conditions report?
what was that?
Chronic health condition. This is what I just barely got, and this is something that
Okay.
if you feel like you're ready to make your decision tonight, you can, or you could say, let's send this back and have Rachel and myself, or Rachel and maybe the Vermont Department of Health nurse take a look at it. And this is breaking it down by number of students with each of the chronic health conditions. And maybe that's what you're talking about what these kind of equates to.
That's what we've been advised by our school health liaison that meets with us regularly. And she offered to come to this meeting, but I didn't know what specific questions would be for her. I'm happy to bring them to her.
Who is it, Rachel?
Well, it's changed in the last year. Stacy Carpenter.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, yeah.
Can I ask one last question? Sorry. The student to nurse ratio, what year was that from?
The education quality standards, this was the 2016, I believe.
So it almost seems to me like it's almost a no-brainer to think that someone with a diagnosis of a chronic illness would require more care than a healthy student who never goes to the nurse's office. So there has to be some kind of weighted average, and that 1 to 500 isn't sounding like that's taking it into consideration.
That's just straight language out of the EQS that I'm bringing you.
And I'm
Do you
curious
want?
about other schools too, if that language is being used. Like, what one of our schools has 500 students in it, and that the other schools in the state that have full-time nurses don't have nearly 500 students.
Right. Yeah, all the data you gave us was schools, I think, under 250 students, and many of them had a full-time nurse.
So are we asking to bump it? Sorry, Mary, go ahead.
I do think it would be helpful at some point, and so I would say if we wanted to wait and discuss further at the December meeting, to have Sandy's perspective as well. It's an important voice in the conversation that's absent tonight, because she's on the ground too, working a lot with Rachel, and I suspect picking up some of that slack when Rachel's not there. I don't know who your designees are, but I assume Sandy's high up on the list.
Sandy is one of them. A lot of it falls on the admin assistant that's, responsible for the whole building day in and day out.
And there's a new admin assistant at both schools.
And both schools have a new admin assistant right now.
Yeah, and I think that in losing Ruth, who had been there for what, 30.
She was an EMT.
Yeah,
She was also EMT trained.
I think that did create probably, some new challenges and a bit of a vacuum as far as, on the ground people who are really kind of capable and confident kind of in that role.
And maybe invite Stacy, or we prepare questions to forward to her and you can bring her answers.
I think what I received today came from her office.
Stacy Carpenter, yes. And she gave me the 1 in 500 number too. And so that doesn't account for, the second piece.
That would be good information for the board to have when they make their decision.
And Brandy, the admin assistant from Berkshire, was at the last meeting to support me at last month. She's new this year as well, Berkshire.
What would the cost look like, roughly? You're talking about adding another full-time person, like full-time in one and full-time in the other? Or 0.8 and 0.8?
Or you guys are gonna have to tell me that. If you're wanting full nursing in all your buildings, it would be adding a person and a half. Because Bakersfield also
Doesn't have a full-time nurse, so it's adding a lot. That's my concern is that that's a lot of staffing to add, and I really want to spend some time with all of the principals. I think, Rachel's here to speak to us about Berkshire and Montgomery, so I really would value some input from the principals, but then, Rhoda's also in a part-time nursing position as well. And I'm concerned about adding a lot of staffing right now, now. I want to, as incrementally and painlessly as we can raise the bar, is what I personally would prefer to do. That's my opinion.
I guess if it's going to be an all or nothing or one or the other thing, I'd rather see nursing than a facilities director.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
I mean, that it's life or death in some cases versus, heat or no heat.
I remember we were talking about facilities manager as somebody who is going to also increase efficiencies for our principals, which might also increase the retention of principals and their ability to provide attention to teachers, which then could benefit students. I don't I'm looking at the same research findings. It's parallel. It's the exact same thing. The research shows that full-time nurses are going to decrease the amount of time that your principals and your teachers are attending to healthcare needs. You're going to close achievement gaps. I'm wondering where the research, I haven't vetted the research, but it doesn't seem like one or the other to me. It seems like these are a need for both. And if we're putting a facilities manager on the table just to see what it looks like, why can't we put a nursing staffing on the budget right now? And if it needs to go later, it needs to go later. So at least we can see what those numbers would look like if that goes there. I don't know, I agree. Sometimes we talk things to death, and we've got kids who are high needs right now. We all know that. We just had a huge conversation about it.
Right.
Yeah.
I think we need to like really
And the
look seriously
residual
at this.
value too of just trickling down, like what you were saying earlier about, sorry, I totally lost. I think it's getting too late at this point. It'll come to me.
My concern as a person who works in an industry that trains nurses as fast as we can frickin' train them, I think you're gonna have, my concern is a monetary one. I think you're gonna have to put some pretty big dollars on the table if you wanna hire some full-time nurses. I'm not
Yes
saying
or
it's a
no?
bad idea. I'm not,
Yes
hold on, let
or
me finish
no?
my sentence. I'm not saying it's
I
a
don't
bad
agree.
idea. I'm just saying I think that you should be prepared for that. And we talked about that the last time you were here, Rachel, that like, that I'm not invalidating the need. I'm just not sure that we will be able to fill the need, even if we say that we have.
But
always a
it's a
possibility.
desirable position. The
Schedule.
hours,
It
the
is.
hours
Yes,
are
yes. You'll get
super
nurses.
desirable compared to working in the hospital or being a home health care nurse.
And more so if
Yeah.
it's full-time.
Yes,
As
absolutely.
if we have to go hire part-time.
I can tell you I happily took like half of my salary to come to work in the school.
nurses who will.
To have a family life.
Yes.
And holidays and
Yeah.
time off with my children.
And I do want to speak to that because I have a family member who's been a nurse for 30 years and the burnout is really, really bad. And we really can't afford to lose the nurses that we have. And that is my concern about that. Because I have a family member at this point in time who doesn't feel that she can fulfill her job responsibilities because they are so overwhelming in such a manner that she's keeping her mental health intact because she's overworked. So if we have nurses that are working part-time and worrying about what's happening the rest of the time, that they're not there, I think that can contribute to turnover as well.
Do you want me to bring back one nurse per building or one nurse per this weighted 500 kids?
No, one per building, I
One per
think,
building.
just to see what it looks like.
Rhoda, you feel you need one too? One full?
I haven't really looked at it close enough to give you an answer on that.
I just feel
I mean,
we should make an assumption for one
yeah.
per, if Rhoda's not saying she needs one.
Yeah.
I'd be.
I mean, I think that we have some needy kids, but I don't think that we have some of the dire needs that are presented to us right now. We definitely have some allergy needs, and things like that, but not like a diabetes.
I think the
or-
demographic difference too makes a big difference. Like Berkshire is much needier. You know.
So no one's asked me to give my opinion, but I was kind of waiting for someone to say, but I could just,
We're like waiting for Sandy, but Lenny's right here.
yeah, well, and from a fiscal responsibility point, we would be fine with how we've been doing things. But I think those contexts, such as my new admin assistant, when the last one had been there since the building was built, practically all of the knowledge there, and then doubling down on Rachel's situation because the same thing's going on at the other school, and then some extra needs came up at the other school, plus some of the needs we have here. I do know some of the things I see Rachel do that are probably different from when this ratio, yes, the EQS came out in 2016, but I think that ratio has been around since God knows when. And I think the needs and expectations of what nursing needed to do and the needs of kids, when Rachel and I are constantly collaborating, and she's doing a lot of legwork on helping families do the things they need to do to help kids. I mean, she's on the phone talking to some parents and helping them read the medical labels and finding out a kid's not getting the proper dosages of something. And then those kinds of things take lots of time and require, there's multiple times when I'm constantly having to call her at the other school and vice versa. I can definitely see a lot of value of having that person here all the time. And I think those kinds of needs are not going to go away. They're becoming more and more frequent. And that's not a judgment of our clientele or families, but when you have the needs that we have in these communities and parents that aren't even able to deal with the medical needs of their kids, she's a resource to support them. But if she's not there all the time, there's a lot of times we have to relay conversations across buildings, and we've gotten by just fine. So I wouldn't say it's a crisis to get that next piece, But then I do look at those numbers and like schools within the same SU with the same needs have a full-time. We'll be fine if we don't. If it comes down to fiscal need, like totally. But if it comes down to probably what is going to be excellent support for our kiddos, it would make sense to have that full-time. But then again, I don't know what the applicant pool is going to be put at full-time, and then I lose Rachel because she goes full-time over at Montgomery, and then I don't have anybody. That would be challenging in its own piece.
Maybe she'll go full-time in Berkshire.
And then you put a stipulation and she can't go anywhere until you hire somebody.
Right? So that's I don't know if it's kind of been sitting a little bit there. Like if we had to make a cut and bring it back down, that's not the end of the world. But if we really could make it happen, I think it's going to serve the community much better.
And then you already just said the comparison, like the economy of scale of this too. Like if you get to that place where you have to look at it through that lens, like if Rachel had to prioritize in terms of the scale of need between the two, I could make some assumptions. I don't think I'm probably going to be saying anything different than you would. But there's twice as many kids in Berkshire, and there's...
No, I wanted to be super duper clear that I'm not here for a selfish reason, that I wouldn't be here not putting my kids to bed and all this other stuff like you are, if I didn't think that this was a really important shift right now and need.
Yeah.
I really think this is what's best for the kids. And that's, in and out every day.
Yep.
There's not a day I haven't thought, oh, I didn't need to be here today.
And I mean, I'll double back to that. Like, I don't want to reveal too much information about families, but like, we're trying to connect families with doctors. We're trying to get a hold of doctors, and sometimes anyone who's had their own medical thing knows how hard that is. And when we got a kid with some seriously complex needs and a family that might not have the right kind of resource to even connect with it, there's times when she's constantly on the phone trying to set up meetings, trying to facilitate meetings, trying to get the right information that does have some pretty intense impacts on that kid's health in that day. And then there's days when she's not there for that at all, and then we're bouncing across. And then that means the paraeducator's pulled out, or a teacher's pulled out, or I'm pulled out.
And then they still have to learn.
Yep.
But before all that, they need to be able to see with their eyes, and they need to be able to hear with their ears, and they need to be able to have their needs.
So Jean Marie, educate some more nurses.
You can convince your friends at UVMMC to let more students in there.
Yeah.
So what would you like us to do in terms of next steps?
Can I just make one last comment before we go to that? Sorry.
You're in charge of this meeting.
Forget that. To go back to your comment, Lisa, about like the Health and Human Service Agency, I was really waiting for you to say something like, wouldn't it be great if we could just take our part-time nurses and partner them with this organization that can offer some cool resource that's not a nurse but is like a nurse, or that can do this health
the
education
problem with
piece,
that is that a school has to have an RN.
Yes.
A school cannot employ a lesser qualified person.
Right.
Well, I want to read this document that I got, because I did see some acronyms in there that were appropriate before. And are you shaking your head like, is it appropriate now or not?
I think they need to be under RN supervision.
But it doesn't mean we couldn't hire LPNs if they were being supervised by an RN.
But that would still mean one of the people has to be an RN and has essentially 1.5 times of a job, because they have to really be, it's their license if the LPN is not doing their job properly in the other school. So I think that route, we thought about that years ago, and we did do that years ago before you even had to have an RN be the supervising person. But I really think the difference in education level, if you're going to be in a building, you need to be capable of being in charge of that building. If you're going to be working remotely, I don't think you should be supervising somebody in another building.
I work remotely every day right now.
Yeah.
So I It's every day.
And she's
And it's not to an
supervising
LPN, it's
Right.
just somebody with no
Right,
medical training.
so if somebody's
To a
in the
paired
other
principal.
building full-time and you're supervising them, that's tough. It's a tough position to be in. So, Jean Marie, I don't have the magic bullet, unless some licensing people come up with a new medical professional like they did for doctors. They came up with PAs
Right.
years ago. So now maybe there's going to be something in between that can work at a school and be autonomous, but I don't know what that is. I don't think they've gotten there yet.
It was just like, wouldn't that be great if there was like a wellness coach that got to be there every afternoon that could also pass out Tylenol and Band-Aids,
Pediatric
or
social worker.
Yeah, exactly. Something that can
It's really
fill that
it
other
sounds like
side of the
it
house.
sounds like clinical case management is a lot of what's going on.
Yeah.
It's not specifically nursing. If you're coordinating
Right.
with doctors, what is this appointment? What is this med?
Right.
I mean, just I don't know.
Yeah. That's all. That was my last comment. Okay, the floor is yours, Lynn.
Oh, I'm gonna get right back to you. What do you want us to do?
Well, I think we heard that Rhoda doesn't know the situation in her building, so we can't, I
Wouldn't say I
guess.
don't know, but I don't know.
Well, no, you don't know the answer to that question, whether your building
Yeah.
is in need of a 1.0
Yeah, I
person.
mean, I just hadn't gone down that route. No.
So, I guess,
That's the part that scares me.
I know.
Like, I don't want to be like, and you get a nurse, and you get a nurse, and you get a nurse, when you're like,
You get
actually,
it.
I need a janitor, or actually, I need a, you know,
Right, 'cause it's not
speech-
equity.
Okay,
so
It's
my
equality.
point
Going
was,
back
can
to
you
that.
get
Yes.
Rhoda at the leadership meeting to give you an answer, whether she feels her building is good the way it is, or she needs to bump up the coverage and then bring it back to us? Just like you're going to with other things?
Can I be transparent with you? I'd rather engage with Stacy Carpenter and have her work with our school nurses and do some sort of an assessment of what are their current levels of needs, and then have Stacy come back for those 3 schools and say, you know, we've looked at it and we think they're appropriately staffed, or we've looked at it and we think Montgomery should be like 0.8 and we think Berkshire should be full-time.
Okay.
I mean, does that
seems
seem like
sounds good.
a reasonable in between?
I agree, because you're
You think
asking
Stacy
me to
would do that?
assess something that I may
I
not
think
have all the
Stacy's happy to
expertise
do that,
on.
but I think Stacy's gonna support whatever the nurse in the building is feeling like.
Well, I think it should, I think,
I don't,
this is not meant to be disrespectful. I
No.
think it should be that and data driven.
or.
Like, I think it has to be more than just, I feel like it should be, I want to be here, or I need to be here every day. And I'm not saying that's what you've done, you've provided data. But I think that Stacy going in and being able to look at, I'm pretty sure what I'm looking at, that was sent to me is what you just described, where she could look at your cases and talk with you about what's the kind of care you're having to provide. You know, how many of those team meetings are you having to go through in a week, and just do an analysis that way.
I think I'm more than happy, and I think she would be too, to do that. I don't know that she'll get a good sense of what I do in a week by coming in. Do you know what I mean? I don't know how long she's gonna.
It wouldn't be about observation,
Or
it'd be
looking-
talking with you, working with Bakersfield's nurse
That's
to unpack
fine,
those
yeah.
things.
That's fine.
Okay, I know what to do.
Okay. I know what I would really like to do.
Stay after
Well-
and talk about checking references.
Is that, are you doing that now? Like, actually now?
At 9:45.
Okay, so can somebody make are we ready? Does anyone have any last thoughts that they want to make? My phone's even telling me I'm supposed to be in bed now. Okay, I'd like to make a motion for us to adjourn at, I don't even know what time it is. 9:45. All in favor, please signify by getting out of your chair.
Aye.
Aye.
Resilience.